Chapter 1953. The expressions of the experts from the fiend race had become extremely solemn when they saw Wu Lingmu's punch. They'd never underestimated the 12 destined saints. How terrifying had the fiend race been all those years ago. However, they'd still been defeated by the 12 destined saints. After all, the fiend race had even called upon their ancestors, but they'd still been defeated and had no choice but to rely on the protection of their ancestors to enter the underground. So, how heaven-defying had the 12 destined saints been all those years ago? Now that countless years had passed, the strength of the 12 destined saints would definitely not stop improving. If the fiend race wanted true freedom, then they had to kill the 12 destined saints. It was pitch black in that unknown expanse of space and nothing could be seen. The members of the fiend race stared fixedly at the dark expanse of space, and their eyes were filled with anxiety. If Guchou lost, then the fiend race would truly vanish from this world. Suddenly, the dark expanse of space gradually recovered to its original state, and Guchou and Wu Lingmu gradually appeared before everyone's eyes. Both of them were still alive. However, there was a deep imprint of a fist on Wu Lingmu's chest. Countless members of the fiend race roared in unison when they witnessed this scene, and their voices were filled with excitement. Victory! Guchou had won. The expressions of the remaining 8-10 apex saints in the sky darkened. Wu Lingmu lost just like that. Guchou glanced at Wu Lingmu from afar. You're still lacking. Wu Lingmu glanced at the silver threads that coiled around Guchou's arm and smiled. Am I not worthy of your silver threads? Guchou shook her head. You entered the Dao through the martial Dao, so I want to defeat you with the martial Dao. Wu Lingmu roared with laughter. Defeat me with the martial Dao, huh? As he spoke, he opened his left palm and there was a stone there. Wu Lingmu gazed at Guchou. This is the last time. Guchou glanced at the stone in Wu Lingmu's hand and said, Is this your martial courage? A trace of surprise flashed through Wu Lingmu's eyes. You know about it as well? Guchou smiled. An ancestor of my fiend race lost to your martial courage. Wu Lingmu smiled. I've gained some new insights throughout the years and I'd like to seek your guidance. As soon as he finished speaking, he slowly closed his eyes, and the martial courage suddenly transformed into a ray of light that shot into the center of Wu Lingmu's forehead. Boom! Wu Lingmu's body trembled violently. His aura suddenly skyrocketed, becoming stronger and stronger. In the end, the unknown spacetime started to boil. Not only that, the spacetime outside started to turn illusory. Whether it was the spacetime inside or outside, they could no longer withstand Wu Lingmu's powerful aura. Muemo and the other saints were filled with disbelief when they witnessed this scene. He who knows God. Muemo stared at Wu Lingmu, his face filled with shock. At this time Yi Xian suddenly looked at him. Muemo, what is this divine knower? Muemo didn't conceal his voice when he spoke, so everyone heard him. Muemo suddenly looked at Yi Xian, furious. What the hell are you asking? Are you familiar with the old man? Is he familiar with you? Yi Xian stared blankly for a moment before he curled his lips. Didn't I just snatch a few dozen of your saint veins? Do you have to be like this? How petty. Hearing this, Muemo was instantly enraged. Yi Xian, you still have the face? You're a dignified swordsman, how could you go back on your word? Are you even human? Yi Xian said indifferently, Didn't I swear? If I go back on my word, let me be pierced through by 10,000 swords in the future. Muemo glared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, I'm telling you, the heavens are watching. Don't think you can ignore an oath. An oath represents a portion of karma. It's not that I won't repay it, it's just that the time hasn't come. Yi Xian felt a little helpless. Old man, you were the one who wanted to snatch my sword first. Why are you making it sound like it's my fault now? Everything I've done. It's just for self-protection. Muemo stared coldly at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian shrugged and didn't want to argue with the old man anymore. It was better to keep a low profile for now. In the distance, Wu Lingmu's aura grew stronger and stronger. Guchou said softly, The predestined realm, entering the spirit realm through martial arts. Wu Lingmu smiled and said, Come, take another punch from me. As he spoke, he took a step forward and then he smashed his fist forward. This punch caused the entire expanse of space to suddenly seethe while everything in the field of vision was being obliterated at a visible speed. This punch had exceeded everyone's understanding. The expressions of the experts from the fiend race became solemn when they saw Wu Lingmu's terrifying punch. In the past, Wu Lingmu and the others were known as the predestined realm saints. Now Wu Lingmu had entered the spirit realm. That was completely different. The members of the fiend race gazed at Guqiu. Can the patriarch stop Wu Lingmu? Xian was quite curious as well. Wu Lingmu's strength had exceeded his understanding. No matter how thick his skin was, he had to admit that Xian was bragging when he said he was the strongest person beneath the three swords. Guqiu suddenly started laughing. Everyone watched as he took a step forward and pointed his finger forward. As soon as his finger descended, the boiling space rippled for a moment before returning to calm. Everything returned to normal. Everyone was stunned. Meanwhile, Guqiu pointed his finger forward again. Wu Lingmu's pupils constricted and he swiftly raised his arms to block. Bang! Everyone watched as Wu Lingmu's figure was blasted flying, and he fell into an unknown abyss of space. Moreover, his martial spiritual vein and body had vanished completely. Everyone was stunned. Wu Lingmu, who's at predestined realm, has been defeated just like that? Mu Mo and the others were stunned as well. Wu Lingmu had attained predestined realm while being enhanced by the gall pill. But he'd actually been defeated by Guqiu with just 2 moves? What's going on? Meanwhile, the experts from the fiend race cheered madly. We won. This time he had really won. The patriarch is invincible. Long live the patriarch. The voices of countless members of the fiend race shot into the sky and reverberated through the world. Within the space-time abyss, Wu Lingmu suddenly laughed. Everyone was looking at Wu Lingmu. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Wu Lingmu chuckled and said, "Destiny Insight Soul. You're the one who's truly attained predestined realm." Predestined realm. Mu Mo and the others' expressions were ugly to the extreme. In fact, they had already guessed it when Wu Lingmu was defeated. Wu Lingmu had attained predestined realm with the help of the gall pill, and Guqiu was able to defeat him because Guqiu had truly attained predestined realm. One had attained predestined realm with the help of an external object, while the other had truly attained predestined realm. In the distance, Guqiu smiled. "You're still lacking." Wu Lingmu looked at Guqiu. "I've lost." He admitted defeat. Guqiu gently waved his right hand and he left that space-time. After returning to the real space-time, he glanced at Xian not far away and smiled. "Mr. Yi, did they attack you?" Xian nodded. "Yes." Guqiu smiled. "Do you need my help?" Xian shook his head. "No need." In fact, he could break the seal now. With the profound azure sword and Xiaota, no one could do anything to his body. However, he didn't want to break the seal now. Guqiu smiled. "All right." Saying this, he looked up at the last level of the pagoda and smiled. "Snow Mountain King, why don't you come out and fight?" Snow Mountain King. Everyone looked up at the last level of the pagoda. The last level of the pagoda. Snow Mountain King. The invincible Snow Mountain King who had almost destroyed the evil clan. Countless tens of thousands of years had passed. How strong would this person who was once like a god be now? Xian also looked at the last level, his eyes full of curiosity. Everyone was looking at the last level of the pagoda. However, the pagoda didn't respond at all. Below, Guqiu smiled and was about to speak. But at this moment, the only woman among the 10 absolute saints suddenly walked out. The woman wore a simple black robe. The robe was simple and plain. She wasn't particularly good-looking, but she definitely wasn't ugly either. She was the type that was good-looking. Especially her hair, which was very long and reached her hips. Seeing this woman walk out, everyone's eyes fell on her. Xian looked at Xue Linglong who stood by his side. "Who is she?" Xue Linglong spoke solemnly. "Fan Jian. She's the 4th to attain the divine realm." Fan Jian? Xian looked at the woman. Under everyone's gazes, the woman walked slowly towards Guqiu. She didn't waste her breath and just raised her right hand slightly. In an instant, the space around Guqiu actually warped. At the same time, a terrifying aura enveloped Guqiu. At the instant this aura appeared, the expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed. A divine realm expert. Fan Jian is actually a divine realm expert as well. Wu Lingmu and the others were filled with shock as well. This Fan Jian had actually reached the level of a true diviner. Wu Lingmu suddenly shook his head and smiled bitterly. He'd thought that he was only second to the Snow Mountain King, but now it seemed like he was wrong. Other than the fact that Fan Jian had also bitterly cultivated in the past, Fan Jian's strength was already above his. He's hiding his strength. A wisp of excitement flashed through Gu Chao's eyes when he saw that Fan Jian had attained the divine realm. Interesting. As soon as he spoke, he took a step forward, and the warped expanse of space around him actually started to gradually return to normal. At the same time, he flicked his sleeve, and the expansive space in front of him swept forward like a tidal wave. Meanwhile, Fan Jian suddenly raised her arm to block it. Bang! That powerful spacetime power was directly blocked by her arm. Gu Chao's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he took another step forward and smashed his fist forward once more. Rumble! Fan Jian was blasted into a spatial abyss. But in the next moment she opened her palm and a sword appeared within it. After that she swiftly slashed it forward. Bang! The mysterious spacetime abyss was directly shattered by her sword strike. At the same time, before everyone could react, she had already appeared in front of Gu Chou. Then a sword light flashed, and in the next moment, Gu Chou was slashed into a spacetime abyss. Everyone was stunned. A swordsman. This woman was actually a swordsman? Everyone knew that a swordsman's battle strength was much stronger than an expert of the same realm. At this moment, the sword in Fan Jian's hand suddenly trembled violently, and a sword cry soared into the sky. In an instant, all the swords in the burial zone started to tremble violently, and then let out sword cries. Submission. This was submission. Next to Yi Xian, Xuelinglong's expression was incomparably solemn. Heaven-absorbing sword. The world's #1 sword. Rumor has it that once this sword appears, all swords will submit to it. If they don't submit, the sword will destroy them. Right at this moment, a powerful strand of sword intent suddenly erupted from the sky absorption sword. This strand of sword intent's target wasn't Gu Chou but Yi Xian. To be more precise, it was the azure sword in Yi Xian's hand. At this moment, Soul's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Young lord, can I act tough? Yi Xian. P.S. Asking for votes. Chapter 1954. Yi Xian's face darkened when he heard Soul. What's going on? Soul has definitely been led astray by Xiao Ta. She's actually trying to act cool at the slightest provocation. Yi Xian didn't stop Soul. He just opened his palm and the green sword suddenly flew out. He naturally wouldn't stop Soul. The green sword was forged by Qing. Not to mention the sky splitter, she wouldn't even be afraid of her father's sword spirit. So she had to act cool. Everyone watched as the green sword shot into the sky and slashed down towards the sky splitter. Fan Jian didn't stop the green sword as well. She knew how arrogant her sword was, and it would definitely destroy anyone who didn't submit to it. So she didn't attack. It was a battle between swords. Everyone watched as the two swords collided in the most brutal way possible. Tip of sword against sword. Bang. Bang. An expanse of sword light suddenly erupted in the sky, and the entire sky was torn into pieces by this expanse of sword light. In the next moment, under everyone's gazes, the sky-absorbing sword actually shattered inch by inch. However, the green sword was completely unharmed. There wasn't even a mark on it. Everyone was stunned. The #1 sword in the burial zone was actually destroyed. Meanwhile, the green profound sword suddenly trembled violently, and then a sword howl swept through the surroundings like a thunderclap. In an instant, all the swords throughout the burial region started trembling violently. It wasn't from submission, it was from fear, and it was extreme fear. Everyone in the surroundings was looking at the green profound sword. Fan Jian stared at the green sword. She didn't speak and she just opened her palm. The fragments of the sky splitter flew back into her grasp and they were still trembling. Fan Jian fell silent. It was the first time she'd seen the sky splitter show such fear, and it was fear of a sword. Fan Jian gazed at the green sword with a trace of curiosity in her eyes. Wu Lingmu's eyes were filled with curiosity as well. He knew how strong the sky splitter was, but the sword before him had been able to destroy it. That was extraordinarily terrifying. As for Muimo, he gazed at Yi Xian with a calm expression on his face, but his eyes were filled with undisguised killing intent. At this moment, Yi Xian opened his palm and the azure profound sword returned to his hand. He looked at Fan Jian and smiled. Fan Jian looked at Yi Xian. Who is the one who forged this sword? Yi Xian smiled and said, "Hi, sister." Fan Jian nodded his head. Your sister is very strong. Yi Xian laughed. Not bad, you're a little stronger than me. Meanwhile, Muimo spoke coldly from afar. Yi Xian, if your sister hadn't forged this sword for you, you would be nothing. So without your sister you are nothing. Understand? Yi Xian smiled and said, to be honest, if it wasn't for my sister I would still have a father. Although he isn't very reliable, he has indeed helped me a lot. Mu Mo glared at Yi Xian. What are you without your sister and father? Yi Xian continued, actually I have a big brother. Everyone, shut up. Mu Mo suddenly said angrily, Yi Xian, don't you feel ashamed? You have to rely on others for everything, don't you think it's a shame? Yi Xian sighed softly and said, to be honest, I'm actually in a bit of pain. Ever since I was born, my father, sister and big brother were invincible existences. Along the way I wanted to fight, I wanted to rely on my own strength to make a name for myself. But my strength didn't allow me to. No matter how strong an enemy is, my sister can take care of them with one sword. Do you know how much pain I'm in? Everyone, Mu Mo's expression was extremely ugly. Yi Xian continued, just like you, Senior Mu Mo, you've cultivated for at least a few million years, right? You've cultivated for a few million years to attain your current accomplishments, but I've cultivated for less than 100 years, yet I'm able to fight you head-on. Just like you said earlier, I would absolutely not be a match for you if I didn't have this sword in my hand. But the problem is that I have it. As he spoke, he shrugged and said helplessly, I was born with what you need to fight for. The gap between us is really too huge. Even I feel unfair for you. Mu Mo suddenly pointed a finger at Yi Xian and even his finger was trembling. You brat. Do you think you're superior even though you're a second-generation kid? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, all of you work hard on your cultivation and fight hard, while I work hard on my sister and father. To a certain extent we're all fighting hard, but the methods we use are different. There are 3,000 great Daoists in the world, so why can't there be a path to fight for your sister? A path to fight for your father? Everyone was speechless. All of them gazed at Yi Xian with extremely strange expressions. Damn it. It was the first time someone had talked about being a second-generation kid in such a fresh and refined manner. How fucking shameless is he? Fan Jian glanced at Yi Xian and for the first time, a trace of indescribable emotion had appeared in his tranquil eyes. Wu Lingmu shook his head. This fellow is truly a piece of work. On the other hand, Mu Mo was infuriated to the point of almost exploding to death. He really wanted to attack, but King Snow Mountain had given him an order not to attack Yi Xian. He didn't dare disobey King Snow Mountain's orders. Meanwhile, Yi Xian said, everyone, I won't hide it anymore. Actually, there really are people behind me. As for their strength, all of you should be able to tell just by looking at the sword in my hand. I don't have any other intentions in saying all of this. It's fine if all of you want to target me. In any case, I'll fight with my life on the line, and if I can't fight for my life, then I'll call for help. In any case, that's basically how I do things. Let me summarize. When he spoke up to this point, he glanced at the others and said, I'm shameless, so do whatever you want. Everyone, Fan Jian couldn't help but look at Yi Xian again. She hesitated for a moment, then said, people still have to rely on themselves. Yi Xian smiled and said, Miss Fan Jian, may I ask you a question? How many years have you cultivated? Fan Jian looked at Yi Xian and said, 11 million years. Yi Xian nodded. I've only cultivated for less than 1,000,000 years. May I ask, what should I do to catch up to you in 1,000,000 years? Fan Jian was silent. At this time Yi Xian looked at Mu Mo, who had been staring at him, and said, Old man, don't look at me like that. Let me ask you, when you were my age, were you as outstanding as me? Mu Mo said sarcastically, I don't have as many people as you do. Yi Xian smiled and said, how about this? Now you will lower your cultivation to the divine physique echelon, and you won't be able to use the 12 layers of time and space. I won't use the sword in my hand, and I won't use any external objects. Let's have a fair fight, okay? A fair fight. Mu Mo narrowed his eyes. Really? Yi Xian nodded. Really? Mu Mo was about to speak when Wu Lingmu suddenly said, Mu Mo, what do you think of this kid? Mu Mo looked at Wu Lingmu and asked, what do you mean? Wu Lingmu sighed softly and said, this kid may look flashy, but he's actually very meticulous. Since he dared to say this to you, it means that he's confident. If he wasn't confident, he wouldn't have challenged you in public. If you fight him and win, the world will think that it's how it should be. But if you lose, even if you don't die, can you afford to lose face? Also, this might leave an inner demon in your heart, which will be very detrimental to your future cultivation. But if he loses to you, given how thick his skin is, he definitely won't have any inner demons. A shameless person will definitely not care about a temporary win or loss, but you can't do that. A murderous look flashed in Mu Mo's eyes. Just as he was about to speak, Wu Lingmu said, "You can't kill him." Mu Mo said coldly, "Why?" Wu Lingmu smiled and said, "Do you see that sword? It's just as he said, there's someone behind him. Moreover, every time I have killing intent towards this person, I feel a trace of unease in my heart." Unease. Mu Mo's expression became slightly unsightly when he heard this. Wu Lingmu was much stronger than him, and Wu Lingmu had that feeling. That meant that this fellow really had someone behind him. At this time Wu Lingmu spoke again. "The Snow Mountain King told you not to cause trouble for him. You know his temper. He wouldn't even look at an ordinary person, yet he deliberately told you to do so. Do you think it's simple?" Mu Mo said solemnly, "Don't you think this person needs to be taught a lesson?" Wu Lingmu smiled and said, "Our top priority is to deal with this fiend clan." Fiend clan. Mu Mo's expression gradually calmed down. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "Mu Mo, are you going to fight or not?" Mu Mo glanced at Yi Xian and said, "I'll spare your life for now." Yi Xian smiled and said, "If you don't want to fight, then forget it." After saying that, he glanced at Wu Lingmu and retreated to the side. At this time, everyone's gaze fell on Guchou in the distance. Everyone felt that it was ridiculous. Guchou and the Fiend clan were the real main characters today. They were almost led astray by Yi Xian. In the distance, Guchou had already left the space-time abyss. He looked at Fan Jian and smiled. "I didn't expect you to hide so deeply. You're actually a swordsman." In the past, Fan Jian had also come out to deal with the Fiend clan, but at that time Fan Jian did not reveal his identity as a swordsman. Fan Jian looked at Guchou and said, "You're much stronger than the experts of the Fiend clan." After saying that, she slowly walked towards Guchou and said, "I can understand that you want to change the fate of the Fiend clan, but I can tell you that you can't change the fate of the Fiend clan." As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her palm, and an energy sword suddenly appeared in her palm. Guchou laughed. "Lady Fan Jian, let me tell you, I, Guchou, will change the fate of my evil tribe today. Not only will I change the fate of my evil tribe, I will also make you pay with your blood." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot. In an instant, the space here instantly became illusory before being obliterated. The countless spacetimes could no longer withstand the power of ancient sorrow. Even the 12 layers of spacetime were being destroyed bit by bit. Fan Jian's eyes narrowed slightly. She took a step forward and tapped forward with her finger. Countless energy swords appeared behind her, and then they suddenly slashed forward in unison. In an instant, the sound of space being torn apart resounded. The world trembled in fear. Chapter 1955. The sword chi that filled the sky seemed endless as it shot towards Guchou. It was a spectacular sight. The sword energy rained down one after the other, and it seemed endless. Most importantly, the sword energy was very strong, and every single one of them could tear through space with ease. The expressions of everyone here had become solemn. A divine knower. Moreover, it was a swordsman. Could Guchou stop it? Under everyone's gaze, Guchou punched out. His punch was extremely slow, abnormally slow. It was like the punch of an old man who was on the brink of paralysis. It didn't seem like he was moving at all. But it was exactly this punch that caused the entire world to slow down. At this moment, all the sword chi suddenly disappeared without a trace. Without any warning, Fan Jian fell into a mysterious space-time abyss. When she fell into the mysterious space-time abyss, her physical body had already disappeared, leaving only her soul behind. Everyone was dumbfounded. What's going on? Wu Lingmu stared fixedly at Guchou, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Impossible. Mu Mo and the others by his side seemed to have noticed something as well, and their expressions were extremely unsightly. Yi Xian glanced at Guchou and sighed in his heart. He guessed something. Guchou's punch hadn't utilized space-time, it had utilized time. As if he'd thought of something, he gazed at the green profound sword in his hand, and he had a question in his heart. Could the green profound sword ignore the terrifying laws of time? Fan Jian waved her hand lightly, and a ray of light flickered as the mysterious space-time abyss was torn open. After that, she walked out of it and gazed at Guchou. Time domain. Guchou nodded. Fan Jian gazed at Gu Chou for a long time, and then she nodded slightly. I lost. I lost. The tension in the hearts of countless vile race members was lifted once more. They were naturally worried. After all, Fan Jian was a divine knower and most importantly she was a swordsman. But now the weight in their hearts had been lifted. Meanwhile Yi Xian suddenly asked, Brother Gu Chou, what's time domain? Brother Gu Chou? When they heard Yi Xian, some people in the surroundings looked at Yi Xian. Especially the members of the wretched clans. Brother Gu Chou? There was something wrong with this form of address. Gu Chou was slightly stunned as well. Meanwhile Mu Mo laughed coldly with ridicule. Yi Xian, you're truly shameless. Don't you know your own strength? You actually have the face to call him brother. At this time, Gu Chou suddenly looked at Mu Mo. What does the matter between brother Yi and me have to do with you? Mu Mo's expression froze. Gu Chou looked at Mu Mo. If you're not convinced, why don't we exchange a few moves? Hearing this, Mu Mo's face instantly turned the color of a pig's liver. Damn it. 2 moves? Even the terrifying Fan Jian had lost to Gu Chou. How could he beat him? Gu Chou paid no further attention to Mu Mo, and he gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. To put it simply, this so-called time domain is something that allows me to go against time and always be a step faster than my opponent. When I fought Miss Fan Jian just now, I went against her time and was a step faster than her. In other words, I attacked first when she attacked with her sword. Of course, many experts are capable of going against time. However, if you can't form a time domain, then Miss Fan Jian's strength can be overcome with a flick of her finger. Time domain. Yi, this chapter isn't finished. Please continue. Xian nodded slightly and asked. Is it difficult to form a time domain? Gu Chou laughed bitterly. It's extraordinarily difficult. If you're able to condense a time domain, then you can directly crush any expert below it. Any expert? Yi Xian was visibly moved and he hurriedly said, Brother Gu Chou, can you give it a try with me? Gu Chou was slightly stunned and then he said, How? Yi Xian smiled. I attack you with my sword and you use your time domain just like you did to Miss Fan Jian just now. Gu Chou hesitated for a moment then nodded. Just as Yi Xian was about to attack, Mu Mo suddenly said angrily, Yi Xian, what kind of existence are you looking for? Don't you know what kind of power you have? At this time, Gu Chou suddenly looked at Mu Mo. Are you retarded? Mu Mo, Gu Chou frowned slightly. What does the matter between me and Yi Xian have to do with you? Don't you know what kind of strength you have? Mu Mo stared at Gu Chou. Gu Chou chuckled. If you're not satisfied, then come down and fight? Mu Mo's expression was as ugly as it could be. Damn it. Was Gu Chou crazy? He was helping Yi Xian like this. In fact, it wasn't just Mu Mo and the others. Even the people of the evil tribe found it hard to understand why the tribe leader would respect such a weak-looking person and even call him brother. Below, Gu Chou coldly looked at Mu Mo. If you say another word, I will turn you into dust in an instant. Mu Mo didn't speak again. He didn't dare to provoke Gu Chou. He dared to provoke Yi Xian, but he didn't dare to provoke Gu Chou. The Snow Mountain King hadn't appeared yet, so if Gu Chou wanted to kill him, even if Fan Jian and Wu Lingmu joined forces, they might not be able to stop him. Wu Lingmu glanced at Mu. Stop provoking that little guy. I don't know if the person behind him can kill you, but I know that he might be able to anger you to death. Mu Mo. Below, Gu Chou retracted his gaze. He looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Brother Yi, if you want to give it a try, then give it a try. Make your move. Yi Xian nodded. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. The next moment, a sword appeared between Gu Chou's eyebrows. At this moment Gu Chou punched. Just like before, it was a very slow punch. However, at this moment Yi Xian's sword was directly between Gu Chou's eyebrows. Everyone was dumbfounded. In the sky, Fan Jian's pupils shrank. His eyes were filled with disbelief. How is this possible? His voice was filled with shock. Wu Lingmu's face was also filled with disbelief as if he had seen a monster. Mu Mo stared at Yi Xian below, his expression extremely ugly. Below, Gu Chou's eyes flashed with confusion. This. As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly looked at the azure sword in Yi Xian's hand. It's this sword. Yi Xian put the azure sword away and smiled lightly. Yes. This sword my younger sister forged for me can ignore any space-time. However, I didn't know if it could ignore your time domain, so I asked you to give it a try. Now it seems like she can. Ignore any space-time. Ignore any time. At this moment, everyone felt as if they'd been struck by lightning. Gu Chou said solemnly, "Can I try again?" Yi Xian nodded. "Of course." As he spoke, he attacked once more. Meanwhile, Gu Chou punched again. The moment he punched out, the space where the two of them were immediately distorted. Time domain. This time. This chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. This time he was serious. However, Yi Xian's azure sword was still pressed against the center of his eyebrows. Fan Jian and Wu Lingmu's expressions gradually became solemn when they witnessed this scene. Besides that, there was a trace of fear in their eyes. Gu Chou shook his head and smiled bitterly in front of Yi Xian. "He really can ignore my time domain." As he spoke, a wisp of a complicated expression flashed through his eyes. "If Brother Yi had given this sword to Miss Fan Jian, then I would have probably been instantly killed." The expressions of everyone in the surroundings became strange when they heard this. Especially the experts from the fiend race. At this moment, they suddenly understood why their patriarch respected this young man so much. Moreover, they even addressed him as brother. If this young man lent his sword to Fan Jian, they didn't dare to think about it. Fan Jian had thought of this as well, and her gaze was constantly fixed on the azure sword in Yi Xian's hand. The reason she'd lost earlier was because of Gu Chou's time domain. If she had this sword, then she was 80% confident in her ability to kill Gu Chou. If she didn't use this sword, then she wouldn't even have a 10% chance of winning against Gu Chou. Because the time domain was a divine ability of another level. But if she used this sword, then her chances of winning would instantly increase to 80%. A strange light flashed through her eyes when she thought up to here. Meanwhile, Gu Chou suddenly asked, "Brother Yi, where's your younger sister right now?" "Younger sister." The light in Fan Jian's eyes vanished when he heard this. At the same time, the wisp of greed hidden in the depths of his eyes vanished as well. Everyone was looking at Yi Xian. It was obvious that this fellow was a second-generation swordsman. Now everyone was curious as to who the younger sister this guy was talking about was. Yi Xian smiled and said, "My younger sister is a swordsman as well." As he spoke, he passed the sword to Gu Chou. "Brother Gu Chou, to tell you the truth, I don't know where she is either. If Brother Gu Chou wants to see her, then you can use this sword to sense her." Gu Chou gazed at the sword in front of him. He fell silent for a moment before he shook his head. "No." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why not?" Gu Chou glanced at Yi Xian. "I'm the hope of the entire clan, so I can't die yet." Yi Xian was speechless. "What are you putting on an act for?" Meanwhile, Muimo suddenly roared angrily. "Yi Xian, what are you putting on an act for? Do you dare to give the sword to me? Let me see that so-called younger sister you're talking about." Yi Xian gazed at Muimo. He opened his palm, and the chuckle sword slowly floated over to Muimo. Muimo glanced coldly at Yi Xian, and then he took the green profound sword. At the instant he did, he frowned. Because he couldn't sense the sword's strength. Meanwhile, Yi Xian spoke abruptly, "Geezer Muimo, allow me to give you a friendly reminder. My younger sister's temper isn't very good. If you sense her, then there might be some bad consequences. You better understand that." Muimo laughed coldly. "Bad consequences? What? Can she cross stellar regions to kill me?" Yi Xian nodded. "Actually, that's a possibility." Muimo roared with laughter. "Yi Xian, you're not trying to anger me to death, you're trying to make me laugh to death." Yi Xian nodded slightly and didn't speak another word. Muimo glanced coldly at Yi Xian, and then he was about to sense her. Meanwhile, Wu Lingmu hesitated for a moment and said, "Be careful." He didn't stop Muimo because they wanted to see the person behind Yi Xian as well. Muimo laughed coldly. "She's crossed countless stellar regions. I'm not afraid of her." As he spoke, he suddenly grasped the green profound sword, causing it to tremble. A moment later, he laughed coldly. "I sense." P.S. The website malfunctioned and didn't update on time. I only noticed it when a reader reminded me. I'm late by an hour. Sorry. End of this chapter. Chapter 1956. Muimo hadn't even finished speaking when a ray of light suddenly entered Muimo's head. Bang! In an instant, the vitality within Muimo's body was completely wiped out. Everyone here was petrified. Gu Chou remained silent as she gazed at Muimo, whose eyes were wide open as if he didn't know what had happened. Fan Jian stared fixedly at Muimo, and his eyes were filled with disbelief and a trace of astonishment. Wu Lingmu's eyes were filled with undisguised astonishment. Meanwhile, Mu Emo seemed to have understood what had happened, and a trace of bewilderment flashed through his eyes. It's so far. How far? Countless stellar regions. Yet he'd only sensed a trace of her aura. And then he was gone just like that. Mu Emo felt that it was quite absurd. Meanwhile, Yi Xian opened his palm and the green profound sword returned to his grasp. He glanced at Mu Emo before retreating to the side. Mu Emo gazed at Yi Xian and his body and soul were gradually vanishing. It was being wiped out. He wasn't able to resist at all. Mu Emo gazed at Yi Xian and spoke softly, "Who is she?" Yi Xian replied, "My younger sister." Mu Mo's eyes were filled with bewilderment. "Your younger sister? Then why are you so weak? Why is your younger sister so strong?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "I haven't matured yet." Mu Emo was speechless. Yi Xian sighed softly. "I told you not to sense her but you just wouldn't listen. You've played yourself to death." Mu Emo spoke softly, "Who knew that she would be so strong?" As he spoke, he vanished completely. Mu Emo had vanished from this world. The surroundings were silent as if it had been frozen. He was gone. Was Mu Emo an ordinary person? He was one of the 12 destined saints. And yet such a super expert was directly wiped out by someone else. More importantly, they didn't even see the other party. For a time the atmosphere here was quite oppressive. Yi Xian sighed softly. A living person is gone just like that. Everyone was speechless. Fan Jian suddenly looked at Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, how should I address your sister?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Others call her Destiny." Destiny? Fan Jian and the others frowned. She had never heard of it before. They were already the strongest in this world. They knew about the group of monstrous geniuses from back then, but they didn't know Tian Ming. Fan Jian looked at Yi Xian. "I've never heard of it." Yi Xian laughed. "It's normal that you haven't heard of it." Fan Jian frowned. "Why is it normal?" Yi Xian replied, "Because she isn't from the burial region." Hearing this, Fan Jian narrowed his eyes. "From somewhere else?" Yi Xian nodded. After a moment of silence, Fan Jian asked again, "Has she surpassed destiny awareness?" "I'm talking about the true transcendence, reaching another level. Do you understand what I mean by that level?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "Damn it, are you looking down on me?" However, he really didn't know. Because he realized that even though these fellows were all destiny awareness, it was obvious that there was a difference in the realm of destiny awareness. Meanwhile, Fan Jian asked again, "Has she surpassed the realm of destiny awareness?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "What do you think?" Fan Jian fell silent. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Continue with your business." After that, he retreated to the side and sat down cross-legged. At this moment he was excited because he had discovered something new. Time domain. The green profound sword can ignore time domains. Does that mean that I can use the green profound sword to create a time domain? When he thought of this, Yi Xian became even more excited. In the battlefield, Fan Jian and the others glanced at Yi Xian before looking away. Strictly speaking, Yi Xian wasn't their enemy. Their true enemy was the evil tribe. Of course, they really didn't dare to offend Yi Xian. This fellow was obviously a second-generation heir, so it would be unwise to offend him for no reason. Didn't you see what happened to Mu Emo? Suddenly, the last level of the pagoda started to tremble. Everyone's expressions changed when they saw this. All of them raised their heads to look at the last level. Is the invincible Snow Mountain King finally going to make an appearance? Gucho was looking at the last level as well. There was a faint smile on his face, and there was even a trace of anticipation in his eyes. After tens of thousands of years, Wu Lingmu and Fan Jian had given him a pleasant surprise, especially Fan Jian's sword cultivator, who had given him a pleasant surprise. But what about the invincible Snow Mountain King? What sort of surprise will he give me? Gucho felt even more anticipation. Suddenly, the last level of the pagoda started to vanish bit by bit. A short moment later, the pagoda had vanished completely, and then a man walked down slowly. The man seemed to be around 30 years of age. His features were sharp and angular, and his eyes seemed like they could see through everything in the world. He wore a simple cloud blue robe with a small sparkling and translucent white jade pendant hanging from his waist. In his right hand he held an open ancient book. Quiet and refined. This was what everyone felt at this moment. Of course, They did not forget that the man in front of them was the invincible Snow Mountain King. The moment the Snow Mountain King appeared, the experts from the Great Snow Mountain were excited. All of them knelt down to pay their respects. Xue Linglong, who was standing beside Yi Xian, also bowed deeply. The invincible Snow Mountain King. This was the belief of all the people from the Great Snow Mountain. Fan Jian and the rest were also looking at the king of Shuashan. In the past they were all geniuses, but in that era, in front of the king of Shuashan, all other monstrous geniuses paled in comparison, including Ku Xiu, who was once a monstrous genius. For these people they were sorrowful. Because no matter how hard they worked, there was always someone above them. Wu Lingmu and the others had a complicated expression on their faces. At this moment the Snow Mountain King slowly turned his head to look at Yi Xian, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground not far away. Sensing the Snow Mountain King's gaze, Yi Xian opened his eyes. His eyelids twitched. Damn it, this guy won't be targeting me, right? This Snow Mountain King was not Muemo, he was definitely not that easy to fool. At this time the Snow Mountain King's gaze fell on the profound green sword in Yi Xian's hand. After a moment he retracted his gaze and looked at Gu Chou in front of him. Change location? Gu Chou smiled, of course. As the voice fell, the space where the two of them were suddenly became illusory. Very quickly the two of them seemed to be shuttling through countless spaces, but in the eyes of the crowd, the two of them were actually still standing in the same place. Seeing this scene, Fan Jian and the others' expressions gradually became solemn. Gu Chou and the Snow Mountain King seemed to be still here, but in fact they were already very far away from them. Beside Fan Jian, Wu Lingmu solemnly said, Fan Jian, do you know what level the Snow Mountain King has reached? Fan Jian shook his head. I can't feel it. Wu Lingmu's eyes suddenly narrowed. You can't feel it? Fan Jian nodded. I can't feel it. Hearing this, Wu Lingmu's expression instantly became solemn, his heart filled with shock. Fan Jian was a divine expert. Yet she couldn't feel the Snow Mountain King's strength? What level is the Snow Mountain King at now? Wu Lingmu's expression became even more solemn. At this moment Fan Jian looked at Gu Chou, who was still shuttling through space, and said softly, That Gu Chou. He's also very mysterious. When he fought us earlier he hid his strength. I just don't know how much he's hiding. Wu Lingmu looked at Gu Chou and said softly, I never expected that after so many years, the evil race would actually produce such a terrifying monster. Fan Jian nodded his head. In every generation there will be a few extremely talented super geniuses. When she spoke up to this point she paused for a moment and then she looked at the distant Yi Xian. Wu Lingmu smiled. Do you think this fellow is a monster? Fan Jian fell silent for a moment and then he said, What do you think? Wu Lingmu glanced at Yi Xian and then he said, Even though he's not bad he can't be considered a top monster. Fan Jian shook his head. You shouldn't look at him in a normal way. Wu Lingmu smiled. Then tell me. Fan Jian said softly, He's very thick-skinned and he's completely shameless. Just based on this, many people can't compare to him. Wu Lingmu frowned. What's the use of being shameless? Fan Jian looked at Wu Lingmu. Indeed, being shameless isn't very useful, but what about being shameless and having a strong background? If you touch him he will anger you to death, do you believe me? Wu Lingmu's expression froze and at this moment he thought of Muemo. How did this guy die? He was angered by Yi Xian to the point that his brain went haywire and then he died. Under normal circumstances, Muemo would definitely not be the one to stand out. In the distance Yi Xian looked at Fan Jian. Why is this woman looking at me? If she was looking at the azure profound sword he could understand, but she kept looking at me. Could it be that she likes me? Thinking of this, Yi Xian looked at Fan Jian, and in fact this woman is very good looking. If I take her into my harem. No, take her as a disciple. If I take her as a disciple with the azure profound sword, even the king of Snow Mountain would be wary of her. But how was he going to trick this woman into becoming his woman? No disciple. Yi Xian blushed with shame. After following Xiao Ta for a long time his thoughts were getting more and more impure. At this moment Gu Chou and the Snow Mountain King suddenly stopped in their tracks. They had already entered an unknown space-time domain. They were now extremely far away from Yi Xian and the others. Both of them were top-notch experts. Once they started fighting, even the aftershocks from their battle were not something that others could withstand. Only by entering this kind of place would they be able to avoid a lot of trouble. At this time Gu Chou suddenly smiled. I have been waiting for this day for a long time. The king of Snow Mountain looked at Guqiu, his expression calm. Come. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly took a step forward. In an instant, the space here actually started to freeze while the temperature instantly plummeted by a few tens of thousands of degrees. If it was in the outside world, then just this moment would have frozen the entire universe. In the distance, Guqiu smiled. Is this your ice-sealing domain from back then? As he spoke, he took a step forward and slowly raised his right hand. Chapter 1957. Ice-sealing domain. The moment the Snow Mountain King unleashed his ice-sealing domain, the space-time around Guqiu froze bit by bit. Even though the two of them were separated from Zhou Xian and the rest by countless spacetimes, Zhou Xian and the rest still felt a bone-piercing chill. On the battlefield, Zhou Xian and the rest looked extremely solemn. The Snow Mountain King's first move was a domain. Everyone looked at Guqiu. Could this peerless genius from the evil ancestor stop the invincible Snow Mountain King? Under everyone's gaze, Guqiu slowly raised his right hand and then gently lowered it. Boom. In an instant, the spacetime he was in began to boil. If the previous spacetime was a 10,000-mile snow mountain, then at this moment the 10,000-mile snow mountain had directly become a 10,000-mile volcano. Moreover, it was a volcano that was erupting. Gradually, the Snow Mountain King's ice-sealing domain began to break. Seeing this scene, Fan Jian and the rest gradually frowned. Their life and death were actually tied to the Snow Mountain King. If the Snow Mountain King lost, Guqiu would not hesitate to kill them. Facing this terrifying Guqiu, even if the 10 of them joined forces, it would be meaningless. Because just Guqiu's time domain was not something they could break. At this moment, the Snow Mountain King suddenly punched out. It was just a simple punch. Boom. And it was this punch that directly shattered the boiling spacetime. The entire spacetime instantly fell silent. Broken in one move. The invincible Snow Mountain King looked at Guqiu, his eyes still calm without the slightest ripple. Guqiu still had a faint smile on his face. Obviously both sides were not serious. Outside, beside Zhou Xian, Xue Linglong suddenly said in a low voice, "Who do you think will win?" Zhou Xian directly said, "I don't know." Hearing this, Xue Linglong frowned slightly. "How can you not know?" Zhou Xian rolled his eyes. "Do you think I'm very strong?" Xue Linglong glanced at Zhou Xian and no longer spoke. In the distant spacetime, Guqiu smiled slightly. He took a step forward and with this step his body became illusory. The next moment he and the Snow Mountain King quickly shuttled through the spacetime around him. Seeing this, Fan Jian's pupils constricted. This is a spacetime domain? Wu Lingmu stared at the spacetime that was being traversed. He wants to use spacetime to tear the Snow Mountain King apart. In that space and time, the King of Snow Mountain's body began to tremble violently. If one looked closely, they would find that a terrifying force was madly tearing at him. Spacetime domain. At this moment, the King of Snow Mountain suddenly took a step forward. With this step, the space and time around him suddenly froze. The next moment he suddenly punched out. Boom. Countless spacetime shuttles turned into nothingness at this moment. Break with force. The King of Snow Mountain looked at Guqiu not far in front of him. That's it. That's it. His voice was calm, but it was filled with undisguised disdain. Outside, Wu Lingmu and Fan Jian looked at each other with a trace of horror in their eyes. They did not expect that the King of Snow Mountain could so easily break Guqiu's spacetime domain. Most importantly, they could not see anything extraordinary about the King of Snow Mountain's punch. In their eyes, it was a simple punch that did not contain any power at all. But obviously that was not the case. Opposite the King of Snow Mountain, Guqiu was silent for a moment, then smiled and said, "The true meaning of power." The King of Snow Mountain slowly walked toward Guqiu. "Is there anything else to surprise me?" Not. Saying this, he suddenly looked at Zhou Xian in the distance. "Let him lend you his sword. I think it will be more interesting if you hold that sword." This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. As soon as these words came out, everyone present was stunned. Let Zhou Xian lend him his sword? Fan Jian and Wu Lingmu's brows furrowed. What were they most worried about? It was Zhou Xian lending his sword to Guqiu. If that sword was in Guqiu's hands, then how terrifying would it be? They had not expected that the King of Snow Mountain would take the initiative to let Guqiu borrow his sword from Zhou Xian? Invincible confidence? Or perhaps invincible arrogance? Zhou Xian glanced at the King of Snow Mountain but did not speak. At this moment Gucho suddenly laughed and said, "Borrow his sword? King of Snow Mountain, do you think I need it?" But as soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly took a step forward, and in the next moment he appeared in front of the King of Snow Mountain. After that he punched straight at the King of Snow Mountain's face. The King of Snow Mountain punched out as well. Both of their punches were very calm and simple, and there was not the slightest fluctuation of power. Bang! As everyone watched, both of them retreated explosively at the same time. As they retreated, both of them fell into a space-time abyss. When they saw this, Fan Jian and Wu Lingmu's expressions became unsightly. The true meaning of power. Gucho had also comprehended the true meaning of power. In the space-time abyss, the King of Snow Mountain took a step forward, and with this step he actually walked out. The King of Snow Mountain looked at Gucho, who also walked out, and nodded slightly. Now it's getting interesting. As soon as his voice fell, he suddenly disappeared on the spot. Almost at the same time, Gucho in the distance also disappeared. Rumble. The space-time suddenly exploded like a big explosion. Countless space-time boiled and then it was annihilated bit by bit. At this moment, everyone could no longer see Gucho and the King of Snow Mountain, because the two of them were simply too fast. The evil clan members stared fixedly at the fading space-time. If Gucho won, then the evil race would wash away the humiliation of countless years, and they would once again ascend to the top of the universe. But if Gucho lost, then the evil race that was born today would forever disappear from the world. Being born meant passing away. The life and death of the evil race all depended on Gucho alone. At this moment Yixian's heart was somewhat restless. Whether it was Gucho or the King of Snow Mountain, they were really too strong. At this moment Xue Linglong, who was next to Yixian, suddenly said, "Is your sister as strong as them?" Yixian looked at Xue Linglong, smiled and said, "Miss Linglong, why do you suddenly ask?" Xue Linglong looked at the countless shattered spacetime in the distance and said softly, "I just want to know Daoist, because I feel that Gucho and my ancestor are really too strong. I really can't imagine that there is anyone stronger than them in this world." Yixian was silent. Indeed, as Xue Linglong said, if he hadn't seen Qing'er, his father and his big brother, he also wouldn't dare to believe that there was someone stronger than the King of Snow Mountain and Gucho in this world. At this moment, Gucho and the King of Snow Mountain were already at the top of the fate-knowing state. Unfortunately, Qing'er was outside of the fate-knowing state. Xue Linglong said again, "Whether it is Gucho or my ancestor, they are both at the fate-knowing state. I am also at the fate-knowing state." Saying this, she shook her head and smiled bitterly. "After seeing them, I realized how weak I am. People like us don't deserve to be at the fate-knowing state." Yixian said with a smile, "Are you depressed?" Xue Linglong looked at Yixian. "Don't you have any thoughts?" Yixian was confused. "What thoughts?" Xue Linglong said angrily, "Seeing how strong they are, don't you feel a little ashamed or inferior?" Yixian was a little baffled. "That's their business. Why should I feel inferior and ashamed of my inferiority? Are you out of your mind?" Xue Linglong's expression froze. Yixian was speechless again. "This chapter is not finished, please continue." He said, "Don't compare yourself with others because comparison will only make you angry." Xue Linglong said calmly, "Don't you have any goals?" Yixian was speechless. "What do you want me to pursue? Invincible? I want to be invincible too. But my strength doesn't allow me to." Xue Linglong, Yixian looked at the space in the distance which was still being destroyed. "I won't feel ashamed or inferior when I see them because I think I'm pretty awesome too." Xue Linglong glanced at Yixian. "How are you strong? Are you shameless?" Yixian laughed. "Miss Linglong, how long have you lived?" Xue Linglong pointed at the space. "I know what you want to say. You want to say that you are young, but isn't Gucho young? He seems to be the same as you. Plus, you are a proper second generation, but you don't seem to be as strong as others. Of course, I know you will say that Gucho got all the resources of the evil race and the nurturing of their ancestors. But you are also a second generation. We're both second generations, why are you so weak?" Yixian spread his hands. "I can't help it. My dad let me grow. If he brought me along and nurtured me, I think I would be able to act cool with my strength. Instead of being showy and flashy every day. If I have strength, who would be willing to be showy every day? Do you think I don't want to be like my big brother who says, 'Kneel and beg for death,' or like Qing'er who says, 'Where is your home? Point me in the right direction. Let your whole family be buried together'?" Saying this, he shook his head and sighed. My strength doesn't allow me to. Shuelinglong, Yi Xian sighed. Just like ordinary people, if a man has no power, no wealth, and you are thin-skinned, which woman will like you? All single men are either poor or thin-skinned. Shuelinglong looked at Yi Xian speechless. Yi Xian continued. You all say I am shameless, that I rely on my father and sister. Miss Linglong, let me ask you, if you weren't the descendant of King Shueshan, with your own strength and without the resources of Great Snow Mountain, would you be able to reach this level? Could you? Shuelinglong was silent. Without the resources of Great Snow Mountain, she would never be able to reach this level. Yi Xian spread his hands. Look, actually, you are also a second generation. Shuelinglong said coldly. I relied on the resources of Great Snow Mountain, but I didn't ask my ancestor to help me kill the enemy. But you, that Mumo. Yi Xian interrupted Shuelinglong. Did I ask Qing to kill him? I don't think I've taken the initiative to contact Qing, right? Plus, he went to find my Qing himself, didn't he? I even reminded him not to look for her, but did he listen to me? He said innocently, those who were killed by Qing basically went to find her themselves. Some of them I couldn't even stop them. Like that Muemo. If you stopped him, he would think you were looking down on him. What could I do? Let me tell you, the enemies now are still better. The enemies in the past were not targeting me, but my father and Qing. I actually quite miss this kind of enemies. I especially like enemies who not only want to kill me, but also want to exterminate my entire family. Exciting, exciting. Really, as long as I hear that someone wants to exterminate my entire family, I feel refreshed and full of energy. Shuelinglong stared at Yi Xian. Have you ever thought, if one day someone stronger than your father is your enemy, what would you do? Yi Xian frowned. Isn't that something my father should worry about? What does it have to do with me? Green-robed man. P.S. Yesterday when I was in a taxi, the driver was looking at me. Do you know what I talked to him about? He didn't know that I was the author. I talked to him and he said that the author on Green Phoenix Peak was the most shameless author he had ever seen. Is this the image of me in the readers' hearts? End of this chapter. Chapter 1958. Shuelinglong had a complete mental breakdown when she heard Yi Xian. This fellow is really a filial son. Suddenly the space here started trembling. The expressions of everyone here changed when they witnessed this scene. Has the battle between Guchou and King Shueshan affected the space here? Suddenly, the space here was like a piece of paper that was being burned, and it was gradually being reduced to ashes. Everyone's expressions changed drastically. If Guchou and King Shueshan were here, then their battle would definitely be able to destroy the entire burial zone. Because the strength of these two people was too terrifying. The burial zone couldn't endure their strength at all. Meanwhile, Fan Jian suddenly said, "Protect this expanse of space." As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her palm and countless rays of light shot out from her palm. The rays of light entered the surrounding space and strengthened it. Wu Lingmu and the others immediately acted and strengthened the space here as well. Obviously, they didn't want the burial zone to be destroyed just like that. With the help of Fan Jian and the others, the space here started to return to normal. But it didn't take long for the space here to tremble and crack apart once more. Fan Jian frowned and she seemed to have thought of something. She gazed at Yi Xian who stood nearby. If the space here shatters, then with their strength, they'll definitely be able to leak their strength here. We'll definitely be fine, but you might not be able to. Yi Xian was speechless. Fan Jian continued, the destruction of the burial zone won't harm you, right? Yi Xian spoke solemnly, Miss Fan Jian, I'm only at the life physique realm. Fan Jian and the others were speechless. How would you know that you're at the life physique realm now? Fan Jian spoke solemnly, your sword. The green profound sword. Yi Xian glanced at the azure sword in his hand. He didn't think too much about it before he opened his palm, and the azure sword flew into the sky. In the next moment, the surrounding space started to tremble violently, and under the gazes of everyone, the cracked space in the surroundings actually recovered bit by bit. A trace of shock flashed through the eyes of Wu Lingmu and the others when they witnessed this scene. Fan Jian suddenly said, Can I have a look at it? Yi Xian gazed at Fan Jian and she replied, Just a look. Yi Xian nodded. All right. As he spoke, he willed the green profound sword to fly in front of Fan Jian. Fan Jian stretched out her hand and held onto the green profound sword. She looked at the green profound sword in her hand and after a long while she looked at Yi Xian. Aren't you afraid that I won't return it after borrowing it? Xian laughed. Miss Fan Jian, you won't. Fan Jian smiled and asked, why? Xian looked at Fan Jian. Because you are a swordsman. We swordsmen have the pride of a swordsman. This kind of filthy behavior, even if you die, you will not do it. Fan Jian looked at Xian without saying a word. Xian continued, Miss Fan Jian, may I ask you 2 questions? After a moment of silence, Fan Jian opened his palm and the green profound sword flew back to Xian. Xian kept the green profound sword and asked, are there any realms in swordsmanship? Fan Jian looked at Xian and asked, don't you know? Xian shook his head. Fan Jian pointed at the green profound sword and said, this sword is full of mysteries. The person who created this sword has a higher attainment in swordsmanship than me. Why don't you ask her? Xian smiled and said, I just want to ask you. He also wanted to ask Qing but he was afraid of being shocked. If Qing said that she did not want to discuss such a low-level question, then he would be in trouble. Fan Jian fell silent for a moment and said, actually, there is no such thing as realms. The path of swordsmanship is ever-changing, and every swordsman's swordsmanship is different. If there is a realm, then it is the same as restricting a swordsman. In my opinion, a swordsman without realms is a true swordsman. This is because he does not walk the path of others. He is not restricted by others. His heart of swordsmanship is free, not bound. Do you understand? Xian fell silent and he was shocked. A swordsman without realms is a true swordsman. Realms? He had heard Qing say that realms are actually a kind of restriction that others impose on others. Why should one walk the path of others? Of course, this was the way of the world. It would be easier to walk the path of others because there would be fewer detours. However, there are some people who do not walk the path of others. They explore and walk their own path. At this time, Fan Jian continued, there is actually no problem with your swordsmanship. At your age it is already very rare. However, because you are facing us now, you feel that you are very weak. But you have never thought that we have lived for millions of years. What about you? You have only lived for 100 years. Why do you want to compare yourself to us? You have to be clear about this. Otherwise, your life will be very tiring. After a moment of silence, Xian nodded his head. Thank you. Actually, he realized that he was a little obsessed. Previously, he told Xue Linglong not to compare herself to others. However, he still failed to do what he said. He wanted to become stronger. Just like this moment when facing Fan Jian and the others, Xian felt that he was very weak. He did not like this feeling. However, as Fan Jian said, what right did he have to compare himself to them? He had only cultivated for 100 years, while they had cultivated for millions of years. What right did he have to compare himself to them? One must know one's own limits. Thinking about this, Xian shook his head and smiled. He felt very refreshed now that the knot in his heart had been removed. At this time, the green profound sword in his hand suddenly trembled. At the same time, a terrifying aura exploded from his body. Xian was stunned. Am I going to have a breakthrough? The crowd was also stunned. Is this guy going to have a breakthrough? In the sky, Fan Jian looked at Xian without saying a word. He was actually a little shocked. Although this guy looked flashy, he was actually very perceptive. Most importantly, Xian would not be stubborn. That was the most terrifying thing about him. It was okay for a person to make a mistake. However, if he refused to admit his mistake and stubbornly refused to be stubborn, then he was either a peerless genius or a peerless idiot. Under everyone's gaze, the sword aura in Xian's body became stronger and stronger. Not only was his aura becoming stronger, but the green profound sword's aura was also becoming stronger. Fan Jian and the others suddenly looked at the green profound sword. Looking at the green profound sword, Wu Lingmu frowned. What does this guy's sword cultivation have to do with this sword? Why is it also improving? After a moment of silence, Fan Jian said, this sword isn't improving, it's unsealing. When Xian improves, it will be unsealed. After a while, this sword will reach another level. As she said this, her expression became extremely solemn. The sword that we see is not the final form of this sword. She is more terrifying than we thought. Wu Lingmu said in a deep voice, Zhao, how strong is the person who created this sword? Fan Jian raised his head and looked at the horizon. His eyes were filled with confusion. Below, Xian suddenly stood up. As he stood up, the powerful sword aura in the surroundings all rushed back into his body. Xian stretched out his hand and grabbed the green profound sword. Boom. The sound of the sword soared into the sky, piercing through the clouds and shaking the sky. Xian slowly closed his eyes. At this moment he felt that his sword cultivation had undergone an earth-shattering change. However, he didn't know what realm he had reached. Xian suddenly turned his head and looked at Xue Linglong. He felt that he could kill Xue Linglong with one move and he didn't even need to use the mysterious space-time. Confidence. At this moment Fan Jian suddenly said, "Congratulations." Xian looked at Fan Jian and asked, "What level have I reached?" Fan Jian smiled and said, "There are two kinds of enemies that you can't defeat now. The first is people like Guqiu and King Xueshan. The second type are those like me and Wu Lingmu." Xian looked at the few saints behind Fan Jian and asked, "What about them?" Fan Jian said, "You can fight with them but you might not win. Of course, if you use the sword in your hand you should be able to win against them. You have 40%. Xian said in a deep voice, "How have I improved?" Fan Jian said, "Sword Dao. The knot in your heart has been untied and your sword Dao has improved. This means that your sword has been freed from a shackle. Do you understand?" Xian said in a deep voice, "In other words, my sword is still bound by a shackle." Fan Jian smiled and said, "Of course. It's not just you, it's the same for me. Every time a shackle is removed, our sword Dao will take a step forward." After a moment of silence, Xian said, "Thank you for your guidance." Fan Jian glanced at Xian and did not speak. At this time, everyone suddenly turned to look. Not far away the spacetime suddenly burned. At the same time, Guqiu and King Xueshan appeared in everyone's sight. At this moment, Guqiu was still dressed in snow white, untainted by even a speck of dust. There was a faint smile on his face and of course, there was a trace of undisguised excitement and fighting spirit. Opposite Guqiu was King Xueshan. He stood there quietly without a trace of emotion on his face. Indifference. His eyes were terrifyingly calm as if everything in the world had nothing to do with him. At this time Guqiu suddenly laughed and said, "Pain. Fighting to my heart's content. King Xueshan, what about you?" Everyone looked at King Xueshan. King Xueshan slowly walked towards Guqiu. "I have to say, you're not bad. Even your evil tribe's ancestor cannot compare to you." Guqiu laughed heartily. "King Xueshan, I don't think it's interesting to continue fighting like this. Why don't we do something serious?" King Xueshan nodded slightly. "Sure." Guqiu spread out her right hand and smiled. "Please enlighten me." King Xueshan suddenly stopped. "As you wish." As the sound of his voice faded, a terrifying aura suddenly swept out from his body. The moment this aura appeared, a formless pressure enveloped Fan Jian and the others who were standing outside. Being enveloped by this aura, everyone felt as if their souls were shackled. Despair. Everyone's minds were filled with despair, including Fan Jian, Wu Lingmu and the others. Fan Jian wanted to release her sword intent, but she found that she could not do so. Under this pressure she, a divine awareness expert, could not resist at all. As if thinking of something, Fan Jian's pupils shrank and he said with a trembling voice, "Above divine awareness." He opened up a whole new realm. Above divine awareness. Everyone present was petrified. Chapter 1959. Above destiny knowledge. No one had expected that the King of Snow Mountain had already researched and created a whole new realm. Seeing this scene, the faces of the evil tribe members instantly turned pale. A whole new realm. Except for the King of Snow Mountain, no one knew what this new realm was like. But at this moment, this pressure made them feel like their souls were imprisoned, unable to move at all. It was just a pressure. What realm was this? The one who was the most relaxed was actually Xian because he was not affected in the slightest. At first he was also a little confused. Why was he not affected? Later he discovered that it was because of the Xianxia sword. The Xianxia sword protected his soul. In the distant spacetime, the King of Snow Mountain slowly walked toward Guqiu. With every step he took, the pressure increased. Outside in the spacetime, countless people's bodies slowly bent down. The King of Snow Mountain did not target them, but even so, they could not bear the pressure that leaked out from the King of Snow Mountain's momentum. At this moment Guqiu suddenly smiled. "I guessed right, you really broke through." As he spoke he took a step forward. As soon as his foot descended, it was like a pebble had fallen into a calm lake, causing a wave of ripples to suddenly arise in this expanse of space. Gradually, that expanse of space started to ripple. Compared to the king of Snow Mountain, Gu Chao's power seemed very calm. Moreover, no one felt any power pressure. However, when the king of Snow Mountain's power came in front of Gu Chou, it disappeared without a trace. Seeing this scene, Fan Jian and the others' pupils suddenly shrank. As if thinking of something, Fan Jian suddenly said with a trembling voice, He is also above destiny knowledge. Above destiny knowledge. As soon as this statement came out, everyone in the field was petrified again. At this moment, the king of Snow Mountain stopped. He looked at Gu Chou and chuckled. Interesting. As he said this, he took a step forward and punched out. This punch was thrown out, and on top of his fist, a soul suddenly flew out. His own soul. In the distance, Gu Chao's eyes narrowed slightly. His right hand gently pressed down, and the space-time in front of him directly rippled. Waves of space-time rippled out like water. At this time, the king of Snow Mountain's soul arrived. Boom. The space-time in front of Gu Chou directly turned into a huge vortex, and this vortex unexpectedly blocked the terrifying blow of the king of Snow Mountain. Outside, the evil clan and the other powerhouses relaxed. However, at this time the vortex began to dissipate bit by bit. Seeing this, the faces of the evil tribe and the others turned solemn again. Can't block it? At this time, Gu Chou suddenly opened her left hand. Come. As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding space-time suddenly rippled. In the next moment, endless space-time gathered towards him, and the space-time vortex in front of him also began to spin rapidly. Fan Jian's expression gradually turned solemn when he saw this. He's allowed himself to become one with countless space-times. If King Xueshan wants to kill him, he must first destroy this endless space-time. The faces of Wu Lingmu and the others turned solemn when they heard this. Destroy countless space-times? There was no end to this space, so how could it be destroyed? This was equivalent to ancient sorrow being an invincible existence. At this moment, the Snow Mountain King suddenly stopped. The next moment, he slowly closed his eyes. In an instant, with him as the center, the surrounding space began to freeze bit by bit. Ice-sealing domain? Seeing this scene, Fan Jian frowned. The Snow Mountain King had used this move before, but it had been broken by Gu Chou. Now, this chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Here again? At this moment, as if he had discovered something, Fan Jian's pupils suddenly shrank. This is not the ice-sealing domain. Hearing this, Wu Lingmu and the others frowned. Not the ice-sealing domain? Fan Jian stared at the Snow Mountain King in the distance. This is the god domain above domain. He has already established his own god domain, and within his god domain he is truly invincible. Now Gu Chou has been enveloped by his god domain. If Gu Chou doesn't have any new powerful means, then he... At this moment, the distant Gu Chou suddenly opened his palm and gently pointed upwards. Boom. As everyone watched, the rippling space around Gu Chou actually started to break down bit by bit. As it broke down, the frozen space-time leaves started to break down bit by bit. But after it broke down, the space actually started to recover, and when it recovered, it had returned to normal. It wasn't frozen at all. Seeing this, Fan Jian clenched his fists and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Not only can he disintegrate space-time and return it to its original state, but he can also use his time domain to reconstruct it. How terrifying. A fight between immortals. A real fight between immortals. At this moment, within the reformed space, the Snow Mountain King slowly opened his eyes. He just looked at Gu Chou and his eyes were still as calm as still water. There wasn't a trace of emotion in them. Gu Chou smiled lightly and didn't say anything. The Snow Mountain King suddenly spoke softly. You're not bad. You're even more outstanding than when I cultivated all those years ago. Unfortunately, you've met me. As soon as he finished speaking, the Snow Mountain King suddenly became illusory. His body became more and more illusory, and in the end he actually disappeared completely. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they witnessed this scene. Did he run away? Even Fan Jian's face was filled with bewilderment, because she couldn't sense the Snow Mountain King any longer. Did he really run away? Obviously it wasn't possible. Suddenly, Fan Jian's pupils constricted, and her body actually started trembling. All of them looked at Fan Jian. What did he see? He was actually speaking incoherently. Meanwhile, Fan Jian muttered as if he'd lost his soul. He is everywhere, everywhere. All of them were stunned. At this moment the surrounding space-time suddenly trembled, and the space-time around Guqiu actually trembled at this moment. Not only that, but the space-time vortex also erupted with a terrifying space-time power that crushed towards him. What's going on? All of them were stunned. Bang! The space-time where Guqiu was suddenly exploded, and the powerful force blasted him thousands of meters away. As soon as he stopped, the space-time he was in started burning, and then it formed a flaming cage that imprisoned him within it. The expressions of the evil race members changed drastically when they witnessed this scene. They wanted to save Guqiu, but they didn't know which space she was in right now. Was she defeated? Zhou Xian looked at the imprisoned Guqiu in silence. At this time the Snow Mountain King suddenly appeared not far from Guqiu. Guqiu chuckled and said, "Transcend space-time. Transcend space-time." Hearing Guqiu's words, everyone was shocked. This Snow Mountain King had already transcended space-time? Zhou Xian also frowned. This Snow Mountain King had already transcended the boundaries of space-time? The Snow Mountain King looked at Guqiu. "You've played with the Tao of space-time to the extreme. Within the Tao of space-time, it's true that I can never kill you because I can't destroy everything. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Endless space-time. However, I have already transcended space-time and I have reached another circle." Another circle. The entire place was silent. The Snow Mountain King had not only reached fate awareness, but also transcended space-time. It seemed like he was only one step ahead of Guqiu, but this one step was a huge gap. Guqiu nodded slightly. "I understand." The Snow Mountain King suddenly walked upwards. Guqiu chuckled. "You're not going to kill me?" The Snow Mountain King did not turn his head. "If I kill you, there will be no one to carry the banner of this universe for millions of years to come." Guqiu frowned. "What do you mean?" The Snow Mountain King did not speak. He continued to walk upwards. Everyone looked at the Snow Mountain King. What was he going to do? At this moment below, the profound azure sword in Zhou Xian's hand suddenly trembled. Zhou Xian frowned. "Little soul, what's wrong?" Little soul said in a low voice, "Young master, there's danger." "Danger?" Zhou Xian's eyelids twitched. Damn, this Snow Mountain King wouldn't want to mess with him, right? At this moment the Snow Mountain King suddenly stopped in the distant horizon. He looked up and after a long time he chuckled. "Only after cultivating for thousands of years can one know one's destiny. How laughable, there's already someone who knows." As his voice fell, he slowly raised his right hand. Under everyone's gaze he gently waved his right hand. In an instant, the endless space-time in front of him was like a piece of paper that had been cut from the middle by a knife. What was he going to do? Everyone's face was full of doubt. At this time, under everyone's gaze at the end of the split space-time, a stone door appeared. The stone door. Seeing this, Guqiu frowned. The Snow Mountain King walked towards the stone door. At this time, in front of the stone door, an old man suddenly appeared. The old man looked down at the Snow Mountain King and said softly, "In 126 million years, you are the second person to discover us." Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they heard this. 126 million years? Zhou Xian stared at the old man, his heart filled with shock. Damn, what kind of terrifying force is behind this stone door? Damn. I haven't even matured yet. This kind of terrifying force, can't they come out a little slower? Inside the space-time channel, the Snow Mountain King chuckled. "I'm curious." The old man looked down at the Snow Mountain King. "Sorry, we don't welcome you." The Snow Mountain King laughed. "I don't need your welcome." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly threw a punch at the old man through the air. Boom. A fist suddenly appeared in front of the old man, but the old man didn't even move. The fist disappeared without a trace. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed, including Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian looked at the old man. Damn, what kind of god is this? The old man looked down at the Snow Mountain King. "If you force your way in, then die." The Snow Mountain King smiled. "Why?" The old man glanced at Guqiu and then said, "Resources. We don't want anyone to share some of the resources we control, just like you control all the resources in the universe below, understand?" In the past, the Snow Mountain King and the others seized almost all the resources in the universe for their own cultivation. Now it was still the same, but they were the ones who were deprived. Tendo has reincarnation. When has it ever spared anyone? P.S. Recently many readers have been discussing which of the three swords is the strongest. Who do you think is the strongest? Why is it the strongest? End of this chapter. Chapter 1960. Hearing the old man's words, the expressions of Fan Jian and the others below all became unnatural. Resources. Originally they thought that they already stood at the top of this universe, but now it seemed that their thinking was really naive. There were many strong people in the world, but they just couldn't come into contact with them. Just like in the secular world, did you think you were rich? Little did you know there were many rich people. People should never take themselves too seriously. In the space-time channel, the King Zhou Xian suddenly laughed. If you won't give it to me, then I'll take it myself. As his voice fell, he suddenly disappeared and a powerful force swept through the field. In front of the stone gate, the old man was expressionless as he raised his hand and pressed down. Boom. Under everyone's gaze, a figure fell straight from the sky. It was the Snow Mountain King. After the Snow Mountain King stopped, the space-time behind him directly turned into nothingness. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings had become solemn when they witnessed this scene. It was obvious that the Snow Mountain King was no match for the old man. How strong was this old man? Below, Xian glanced at the old man and felt a headache coming on. What was going on today? Why did so many super strong people come out? In front of the stone gate, the old man looked down at the Snow Mountain King, his eyes full of indifference. An ant trying to shake a tree. The Snow Mountain King laughed. Again. As his voice fell, he suddenly disappeared. In front of the stone gate, the old man frowned. The next moment he closed his eyes and raised his arm to block. Rumble. Before anyone could react, a powerful force slammed into the old man's arm. The old man retreated tens of thousands of feet, and as soon as he stopped, a figure fell straight from the sky. The old man suddenly raised his head. He was about to attack, but the Snow Mountain King suddenly disappeared. The old man frowned slightly and a trace of seriousness flashed in his eyes. Above space-time. At this moment the old man's pupils suddenly shrank. He saw the space-time around him suddenly collapse and annihilate. Boom. The old man retreated tens of thousands of feet again. After stopping, the old man's eyes flashed fiercely. He took a step forward and punched out. Rumble. The space-time in front of him directly boiled and then shattered. But the King of Snow Mountain did not exist in that space-time. The old man frowned once more and he glanced at the surroundings. Meanwhile, a fist had suddenly appeared in front of him. The old man's reaction was extremely swift, and he'd smashed his fist forward as soon as it appeared. Rumble. The fist seal was directly shattered by his punch. At this moment the old man suddenly turned around and slammed his palm down. Boom. Time and space within a radius of several 100,000 feet was directly annihilated. Down below, the expressions of Xian and the others changed greatly, and they retreated explosively. It was clear that in order to kill the Snow Mountain King, this old man did not care about the life and death of this burial domain. When Xian and the others retreated hundreds of thousands of feet, the King of Snow Mountain appeared in front of the old man. The corners of the old man's mouth curved in a mocking smile. You think you can kill me just because you're above time and space? What a joke. As he spoke, he took a step forward. With this step at the center, the space in the surroundings actually started to burn. Seeing this scene, the expressions of Xian and the others in the distance changed greatly. This old man really did not care about the life and death of the burial domain. If this continued, the burial domain would be directly destroyed. In the distance, the King of Snow Mountain suddenly opened his palm. In an instant, an illusory ice shield appeared in front of him. As soon as this ice shield appeared, a fist seal directly smashed into it. Rumble. The god realm that the King of Snow Mountain was in directly shattered, and the King of Snow Mountain retreated several thousand feet. As soon as he stopped, the old man once again appeared in front of him. A trace of viciousness flashed in the King of Snow Mountain's eyes. Instead of retreating, he took a step forward and punched out. Rumble. The King of Snow Mountain was directly smashed into a mysterious space-time abyss. At the same time, time and space within a radius of several million feet turned pitch black. Not only that, but the residual power of the old man and the King of Snow Mountain continued to ripple outwards. The entire burial domain was directly damaged. Seeing this scene in the distance, Fan Jian, Gucho and the others all had ugly expressions. In truth, whether it was Fan Jian, the others or the evil tribe, none of them hoped for this universe to be destroyed. Because this universe was their home. Thus, when the King of Snow Mountain and Gucho fought, both of them had entered a distant space-time world. But now the old man was playing around like this. It wouldn't be long before the burial domain was completely destroyed. At this time, Gucho suddenly looked at Yi Xian, hesitated and then said, "Brother Yi, can you help me guard this space-time?" Yi Xian glanced at the old man fighting the king of Snow Mountain. "If they don't stop, we won't be able to defend this place." Gucho fell silent. Although the profound azure sword in Yi Xian's hand could repair space-time, as Yi Xian had said, if the king of Snow Mountain and the old man didn't stop, then they wouldn't be able to defend the burial domain even with the profound azure sword. Just at this time, the king of Snow Mountain suddenly stopped and looked at the old man. Change places. Obviously, he didn't want to destroy the burial domain. The old man sneered, "Why would I want to change places with you?" The king of Snow Mountain frowned. "My battle with you has nothing to do with others." The old man sneered, "I couldn't tell that the king of Snow Mountain was a benevolent person. As far as I know, in order to reach a higher level, you didn't hesitate to plunder the entire burial domain's resources for your own use. What, now you feel pity for the living beings of this universe? Don't you think it's ridiculous?" The king of Snow Mountain looked at the old man. "You want to destroy the burial domain." The old man's mouth curved into a cold smile. "You guessed right." As his voice fell, he took a step forward. With this step, a terrifying aura suddenly swept out from his body. In an instant, the entire burial domain began to boil. Seeing this scene, the faces of Gucho and the others in the distance darkened. This old man really wanted to destroy the entire burial domain. At this time, Gucho suddenly said, "Sir, is it necessary to destroy the entire burial domain?" The old man coldly glanced at Gucho. "If you want to destroy it, then destroy it. Do you have a problem with that?" Gucho frowned. "Old man, let me tell you, it doesn't matter if you want to destroy us, but there is someone here that you can't afford to offend. You have to think clearly." The old man sneered. "Someone I can't afford to offend? Are you joking?" Gucho suddenly pointed at Yi Xian angrily saying, "My brother Yi is here, how dare you act rashly?" Hearing this, Yi Xian's eyes widened. "CK Gucho, what do you mean? Are you trying to make me hate you?" The old man looked at Yi Xian, and when he saw Yi Xian he frowned slightly. Gucho hurriedly said, "This is my brother Yi, the strongest second, the #1 genius. Don't say I didn't warn you. If you dare touch him, a sword might suddenly pierce your head." Yi Xian, "Everyone." The old man looked at Yi Xian and after a moment he said in a low voice, "Why is it that when I have killing intent towards you I feel a trace of danger?" Yi Xian hesitated, and just as he was about to speak, Gucho suddenly appeared in front of him. Gucho looked at Yi Xian, cupped his fists and said, "Brother Yi, you called me Brother Gu before and I call you Brother Yi. In other words, we are brothers. Since we are brothers, I have a request. You won't refuse, right?" Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. "You?" Gucho suddenly patted Yi Xian's shoulder, smiled and said, "I know you definitely won't refuse." After saying that, he didn't wait for Yi Xian to speak and took the green profound sword from Yi Xian's hand. The next moment he disappeared, and when he reappeared he was already in front of the old man. He handed the green profound sword to the old man, smiled and said, "Your Excellency, I know you are very strong, but do you dare to compete with the person who made this sword?" The old man glanced at the green profound sword, then smiled and said, "What, are you threatening me?" Gucho smiled slightly. "I wouldn't dare." The old man looked at Gucho. "I'll tell you the truth, it's not that I want to destroy your universe. It's that the higher-ups want to destroy your universe, because the appearance of the king of Snow Mountain made them feel a trace of danger. Although it's only a trace, they don't want a stronger person to appear in this universe in the future. Do you understand?" Gucho was silent for a moment, then said, "I understand." The old man pointed at Yi Xian and then he said, "You told me so much just now because you wanted me to target him on purpose. Obviously, this young man isn't simple. But what you don't know is that the more he is not simple, the more he deserves to die. Because the higher-ups will not allow any other worldlings to appear." Yi Xian. After a moment of silence, Gucho looked at Yi Xian and smiled bitterly. "Brother Yi, I really don't know how to act tough, why don't you do it yourself?" After he finished speaking, he returned to Yi Xian with the Qingxian sword and said, "I'm sorry, I wanted to save my clansmen, so I wanted to drag you down with me. But now, it seems that you don't need me to draw hatred for you. You're born with hatred. I was quite worried at first, but when I saw that he was going to mess with you, I suddenly stopped panicking." Yi Xian. At this time the old man's gaze fell on Yi Xian. Even the king of Snow Mountain did not make me feel danger, but you can make me feel danger. Young man, can you tell me why? Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, I have no intention of being enemies with you. The old man looked at Yi Xian, but what if we want you to die? Yi Xian was a little puzzled, because I make you feel a trace of danger? The old man nodded, we do not allow anyone who can threaten us to exist. To strangle a genius in the cradle, do you understand this principle? Yi Xian looked at the old man, so you must kill me? The old man said, yes, because we do not want a second king of Snow Mountain to appear. The old man said, yes, because we do not want a second king of Snow Mountain to appear. The old man said, call for help. Saying that he paused, then smiled, right, call as much as you want, we are invincible, you can do as you please. Yi Xian. Chapter 1961. We are invincible, you can do as you wish. Confidence. The old man's words were filled with invincible confidence. Of course they had this confidence because in their eyes, the burial domain cosmos was a low-level civilization cosmos. Not to mention Yi Xian, even the Snow Mountain King who stood at the top of the universe, was nothing in their eyes. The reason they wanted to destroy this universe was not because they feared the Snow Mountain King and the others, but because they wanted to reduce trouble. Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was undoubtedly the most mysterious person in everyone's hearts. They all knew that there was someone behind him, but no one knew how powerful that person was. Would he be stronger than this old man? No one knew, but everyone felt that it was unlikely. This old man's strength had already exceeded the scope of this universe. At this time Gucho suddenly chuckled. Sir, don't you think you're too arrogant? The old man looked at Gucho. It's not that I'm too arrogant, it's that your horizons are too low. You don't know what a true expert is. You are still studying the Tao of spacetime, and so far only the Snow Mountain King has transcended the scope of spacetime. But where I come from, our people start learning the top Tao of spacetime from birth. The ultimate Tao of spacetime that you pursue your entire life, our people are born with it. Saying this, he shook his head and smiled. You and us are not on the same level. Dimensional strike. Everyone was silent. Arrogant? Very arrogant. But he had the strength to do so. At this time the old man looked at Yi Xian. What are you still waiting for? Yi Xian was somewhat helpless. He discovered that, as Gucho had said, he was a person born with hatred. This old man was originally targeting the Snow Mountain King, Gucho and the others, but now he was targeting him and even wanted him to call for help. If he didn't call for help, he would act like he was looking down on him. What should he do? At this time Gucho walked to Yi Xian's side. He looked at the old man in the sky and whispered, Brother Yi, are you worried that the person behind you is no match for this old man? If that's what you're worried about, I can tell you that I've already read this old man's fortune. If you let him sense your sister, he'll definitely die. With that he looked at Yi Xian. My fortune-telling is very accurate. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, the old man suddenly pointed at the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand. The person who made this sword is the person behind you? Gucho hurriedly nodded. Yes. If you think you're invincible, you can sense her. As he spoke, he seized the green profound sword from Yi Xian's hand, and then he hurriedly sent it over to the old man. Yi Xian was speechless. Gucho looked at the elder. He pointed at the green profound sword. Come. The old man smiled. As you wish. As he spoke, he reached out to grab the green profound sword, while Gucho hurriedly retreated to the side. The old man slowly closed his eyes and the green profound sword in his hand began to tremble. Everyone was looking at the old man. Meanwhile, the old man frowned slightly. He hadn't sensed the woman in a plain dress, but he'd sensed danger. At the same time, a trace of uneasiness arose in his heart. Meanwhile, Gucho suddenly laughed. Why did you stop? You're not afraid, are you? The expressions of the surrounding people also became strange. The old man glanced at Gucho and sneered. Afraid? How laughable. As he spoke, he closed his eyes once more. The green profound sword trembled more and more violently. Meanwhile, the old man frowned deeply because the uneasiness in his heart grew stronger and stronger. He'd never felt like this before. Could it be that she's really an extraordinary expert? When he thought of this, the old man was about to give up. Even though he was confident, he didn't think that he was invincible. At this moment, the uneasiness in his heart made him understand that she wasn't an ordinary person. Give up. The old man was about to give up when he suddenly raised his head, and his pupils constricted. I sense. Hiss. At this moment, a sword light flew out of nowhere. Seeing this sword, the old man's pupils suddenly constricted. He wanted to make a move, but the moment the thought arose in his mind, the sword light had already entered his brow. Boom. The old man's body disappeared, leaving only his soul. Not only that, but his soul was also disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Everyone was petrified. It was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Instant kill. Everyone's mind went blank as if they'd been struck by lightning. What was the strength of this old man? He was an existence that could suppress the king of Snow Mountain. Yet such a super expert had been killed in an instant? Not only the crowd but even the king of Snow Mountain and Guchou felt their hearts churning like waves. Especially the king of Snow Mountain. He was very clear about the old man's strength, but he didn't expect that the old man would be instantly killed. Moreover, he'd been killed across countless star fields. How strong was the other party? Guchou and the king of Snow Mountain's faces became unprecedentedly solemn. Not far away, the old man who hadn't died yet had a blank look in his eyes. This is impossible, absolutely impossible, Guchou shrugged. Accept reality. You're already gone. Everyone, the old man looked at Guchou as if he'd lost his soul. Absolutely impossible, so far away, how could she kill me? I didn't even have the power to fight back? How is this possible? Guchou blinked. I sympathize with your experience, but to be honest, I'm taking pleasure in your misfortune. Everyone, the old man stared at Guchou, his eyes full of resentment. Do you think you've won? No. Once I die, you'll completely anger the people above you. Guchou suddenly said, we have brother, yes sister. She alone can beat all of you. Xian, the old man glanced at the profound azure sword in Xian's hand, then completely disappeared. He was directly erased. He truly disappeared. Everyone was still silent. What happened today was too dramatic. At this time, Guchou softly said, a living person is gone just like that. Everyone. At this time, Xian opened his palm, and the profound azure sword returned to his hand. Happy? He wasn't happy at all. Because he knew that an even bigger trouble was definitely coming soon. Without thinking too much, Xian glanced at Guchou, King Xueshan and the others. Do you still want to fight? Still want to fight? Hearing Xian's words, the expressions of the evil race and Fan Jian's people became somewhat unnatural. Still want to fight? At this time, Fan Jian suddenly pointed to the sky. Everyone looked up. The stone door in the sky was still there and it hadn't disappeared. Everyone's expressions turned solemn when they saw this. Xian looked at King Xueshan. Senior, do you know what kind of force that is? King Xueshan shook his head. I sensed them a long time ago, but at that time I wasn't strong enough to break the space-time tunnel. Xian looked at everyone. Everyone, let me give you a small suggestion. You should know that although the old man died, this is definitely not the end. It is the beginning. In other words, it won't be long before the force behind the stone door attacks us again. Everyone was silent. Xian continued. Don't pin your hopes on me. I can't contact my sister. If they don't use the profound azure sword to find my sister, then my sister won't attack them. Do you understand? Fan Jian suddenly said, Young Master Yi, where is your sister now? Xian shook his head. I don't know. After saying this, he turned around and left. At this time, a terrifying aura suddenly swept out from the stone door. Everyone raised their heads in unison. Xian stopped in his tracks. He felt a headache coming on. Damn it. They didn't give him any time to develop. This was going to force him to his death. Right at this moment, the stone door was suddenly opened, and then a middle-aged man walked out from within. The middle-aged man wore an embroidered robe, and the entire expanse of the heavens and the earth instantly became illusory as soon as he walked out. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings became solemn when they witnessed this scene. The middle-aged man looked at everyone below and smiled. Who killed the old man just now? Down below, everyone turned around to look at Xian. Xian's face darkened. 10,000 horses galloped in his heart. The middle-aged man's gaze fell on Xian. After a moment he looked at everyone. Are you joking? Everyone hurriedly shook their heads. Xian was speechless. The middle-aged man looked at Xian again. After a moment he chuckled. You don't look like someone who can kill someone at the Heartless Realm. Xian said solemnly. Heartless Realm. The middle-aged man nodded. That's our realm. Xian looked at the middle-aged man. What's your realm? The middle-aged man smiled. Dao Brink. Xian shook his head. I've never heard of it. The middle-aged man smiled. It's normal. As he spoke he looked at the Snow Mountain King. Originally we belonged to two different worlds. You live your lives and we live ours. But you just had to break this peace. Fan Jian suddenly said, We're not going to your world. Actually, besides the Snow Mountain King, even though they were curious about the Dao Brink, they knew very well that they weren't qualified to enter it. The difference in strength between them was too great. Wouldn't they be courting death if they insisted on entering someone else's world? Meanwhile, the middle-aged man smiled. Originally we could have lived in peace. But you killed one of our people. Fan Jian wanted to say something but she hesitated. Meanwhile, a saint behind her suddenly pointed at Xian. He was the one who killed them. It has nothing to do with us. Xian glanced at that person and didn't say anything. The middle-aged man looked at Xian and smiled without saying a word. Xian looked at the crowd. Everyone was silent and no one spoke. P.S. Maybe I don't update the most, but I am definitely the most punctual. Furthermore, it never stopped updating. Chapter 1962. In front of the stone door, the middle-aged man looked at Xian and said with a smile, You killed him? Xian smiled and said, Yes. The middle-aged man shook his head and smiled. If you killed him it would be equivalent to you saving this universe. But now, the people of this universe want to disassociate themselves from you. What do you think? Xian smiled and said, I don't have any thoughts. The middle-aged man smiled and said, If that's the case then you come with me. Xian looked at the middle-aged man. Can I resist? The middle-aged man nodded. You can. Xian was silent. Resist? How to resist? Let him feel the Xianxian sword? Thinking of this, Xian shook his head and smiled. This guy in front of him didn't look like a retard. At this time Guchou suddenly said, Brother Yi. Xian looked at Guchou. Guchou smiled slightly. How can I let you bear this alone? Xian hurriedly asked. You want to help? Guchou laughed. If you didn't stand up just now, who among us could resist that old man? And now they want revenge, how can we let you bear it alone? Xian hurriedly pulled Guchou in front of him. Brother Gu, I was waiting for you to say this. Come, you bear it now. Guchou's expression froze. Everyone, Guchou pulled Xian's sleeve. Aren't you going to be polite? Xian said seriously. We are brothers, why be polite? Guchou hesitated and then said, Why don't you be a little more polite? Xian shook his head. I won't. Guchou. At this time the middle-aged man looked at Guchou. Are you going to help him? Guchou hesitated and then said, I want to reconsider. Xian. The middle-aged man shook his head and smiled. Are you two playing with me? Guchou suddenly looked at Xian. Brother Yi, may I borrow your sword? Xian nodded. Of course. As he spoke he opened his palm and the green profound sword flew to Guchou. Guchou gripped the green profound sword and looked up at the middle-aged man. Brother Yi, if I die please help me take care of my people. Xian nodded. Alright. Everyone, Good Sorrow looked at Xian. You, Xian said seriously, don't worry, if you die I will definitely take good care of your clansmen unless I die. The evil race. After a moment of silence Guchou said, I met the wrong person. As he spoke he turned around to look at the middle-aged man and roared with laughter. Come, let me experience an expert at the brink of Dao. As soon as he finished speaking he suddenly disappeared on the spot. The middle-aged man suddenly stretched out two fingers and gently pinched. Boom. A sword light was caught between his fingertips. The green profound sword was caught between these two fingers and could not move at all. The middle-aged man glanced at the green profound sword in front of him and smiled. A very powerful sword. As he spoke he lightly shook. Boom. Guchou and his sword were sent flying tens of thousands of feet away. As soon as he stopped, a black space-time net trapped him. Guchou's expression changed greatly. He casually slashed out with his sword. The black net was directly torn apart. Seeing this, the middle-aged man's eyes flashed with surprise. Your sword is a bit interesting. Guchou looked at the green profound sword in his hand and praised, good sword. As he spoke he glanced at Zhou Xian and smiled. Brother Yi, you're so cheap. Zhou Xian's face darkened. He was about to speak. This chapter is not over, please continue. But at this moment, Gu Chou suddenly looked at the middle-aged man. Again. As soon as he spoke he suddenly disappeared on the spot. A sword suddenly slashed down from above the middle-aged man's head. At this moment the middle-aged man took a step back, and the sword slashed through thin air. Gu Chou's expression changed greatly and he hurriedly blocked with his sword. Boom! The green profound sword trembled violently and Gu Chou retreated tens of thousands of feet. And as soon as he stopped, the middle-aged man suddenly took a step forward and punched out. With this punch the space-time in front of Gu Chou suddenly split apart. Gu Chou's eyes narrowed slightly and he directly displayed the time domain. The next moment the split space-time actually recovered, and at this moment, a sword appeared between the middle-aged man's eyebrows without warning. But it was still caught between two fingers. The middle-aged man's two fingers exerted force, wanting to break the green profound sword, but he found that he could not. The middle-aged man frowned. At this moment Gu Chou suddenly exerted force. Boom! With a loud explosion, Gu Chou and his sword were directly blasted into a mysterious spacetime tens of thousands of feet away. In that spacetime, countless black divine lightning suddenly appeared. Seeing this, Gu Chou's pupils suddenly shrank. At this moment the black divine lightning poured down. Rumble! The entire spacetime directly shook. Gu Chou hurriedly held the green profound sword and stabbed upwards. Boom! A bolt of divine lightning was stabbed by the green profound sword, and then it exploded. It was like cutting tofu. Seeing this, the middle-aged man in the distance frowned. Your sword. At this moment, Gu Chou was also slightly stunned. Because he found that even though he had fallen into this mysterious spacetime he did not feel any danger at all. The sword was too amazing. In the distance the middle-aged man smiled. Your sword is really too interesting. As he spoke he took a step forward and in the next moment he turned his hand and pressed down. This time, a spear with extremely terrifying force swept down from above Gu Chou's head. Gu Chou's pupils suddenly shrank and he hurriedly raised his sword to block it. At the same time the surrounding spacetime directly merged with him. Boom! Gu Chou's spacetime trembled violently and then it caved in, but it did not shatter. That spacetime forcefully blocked this terrifying spear. The middle-aged man's eyes narrowed slightly. This spear of mine transcends the scope of spacetime, but you are one with spacetime, yet you can actually resist my spear. As he spoke he looked at the cyan profound sword in Gu Chou's hand. It's because of this sword. Gu Chou looked at the cyan profound sword in his hand, his eyes filled with excitement. He found that with the support of this sword his spacetime domain was countless times stronger. With the support of the cyan profound sword, even an expert who transcended spacetime like the middle-aged man could not do anything to it. It was too terrifying. Gu Chou suddenly turned to look at Zhou Xian. Brother Yi, why don't you give this sword to me? Zhou Xian smiled. Why don't you sense my sister and ask if she agrees? Gu Chou's mouth twitched. Pretend I didn't ask. He did not want to die. Gu Chou looked up at the middle-aged man in the distance. The middle-aged man flicked his sleeve, and the spear suddenly tore through the air towards Gu Chou. Gu Chou suddenly slashed down with his sword. Boom! The spear was stopped, but the powerful force sent the cyan profound sword in his hand flying. At the instant the cyan profound sword flew out, Gu Chou's pupils constricted because he sensed a trace of the aura of death. He hurriedly dodged to the side, but it was still too late. The spear pierced through his right chest. When he stopped, his entire body had already entered a dark space-time, and the black divine lightning from before had appeared once more. Gu Chou's expression changed drastically when he saw this scene, and he hurriedly said, Brother Yi, save me. No. This chapter isn't finished, please continue to the next page. With the cyan profound sword he would absolutely be unable to block the black divine lightning. Meanwhile, a ray of sword light flew into this spacetime and it was the cyan profound sword. Gu Chou hurriedly grabbed the cyan profound sword and in the next moment the cyan profound sword brought him out. However, his body was firmly locked down by a powerful force, and he was unable to move at all. On the other side, the middle-aged man turned to look at Zhou Xian and he smiled. A very interesting sword. Zhou Xian looked at the middle-aged man. What do you want to do? The middle-aged man smiled. Kill. Of course I'm not going to kill you. As he said this, he looked at the King of Snow Mountain in the distance. The King of Snow Mountain's expression was calm. Kill me? The middle-aged man looked at the King of Snow Mountain and he smiled. You said before that if we don't give you resources, you'll take them yourself? The King of Snow Mountain looked at the middle-aged man, and there was no fear in his eyes. Yes. The middle-aged man smiled. Come try it. As his voice fell, he suddenly took a step forward. With this step, the spear in front of Gu Chao's chest suddenly flew out, and in the next moment, it appeared directly in front of the King of Snow Mountain. The King of Snow Mountain's entire body disappeared. The middle-aged man smiled. Above space-time? As he said this, he opened his palm and the spear appeared in his hand. In the next moment he held the spear and stabbed fiercely to the right. His space-time was torn apart, and in the next moment, a stream of blood shot out from that space-time, and the next moment, a figure flew out. It was the King of Snow Mountain. The moment the King of Snow Mountain flew out, the middle-aged man flicked his sleeve. Boom. A black space-time net directly locked the King of Snow Mountain. His eyes flashed with hostility and he suddenly punched out. Boom. The space-time net directly deformed, but it did not break. The King of Snow Mountain still wanted to attack, but at this time the middle-aged man suddenly disappeared. The King of Snow Mountain's pupils shrank and his arms suddenly blocked. A spear suddenly pierced through the King of Snow Mountain's arms, and then pierced between his eyebrows. Boom. The King of Snow Mountain's body froze in place. The faces of Fan Jian and the others became unprecedentedly solemn. The invincible King of Snow Mountain was gone just like that? The middle-aged man looked at the King of Snow Mountain and smiled. Above space-time? Is it very powerful? No, that is just the beginning. The King of Snow Mountain looked up at the stone door, his eyes full of confusion. Thousands of years of cultivation, but in one day nothingness. The results of his tens of thousands of years of cultivation were just the beginning in the eyes of others? The King of Snow Mountain looked at the stone door, and his body and soul became more and more illusory. Dead. The scene was deathly silent. The invincible King of Snow Mountain was really dead. Gu Chao's expression was sad. Although he and the King of Snow Mountain were also enemies, seeing the other die here, he couldn't help but feel a little sad. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and then with a grab, a spatial ring fell into his hand. It was the King of Snow Mountain's spatial ring. He took a glance at the storage ring before putting it away without batting an eyelid. Everyone. At this moment, a saint behind Fan Jian suddenly pointed at Yi Xian and said, "He killed your people, why don't you make trouble for him?" The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. "Do you know why I dared to kill the King of Snow Mountain? Because he can't kill our people." As he spoke, he sized up Yi Xian and said, "Do you know why I didn't kill this little brother? Because if he can kill our people, then he can probably kill me too. There is no deep hatred between us, so why should I kill this little brother?" At this point he smiled slightly. "Actually, the Dao Edge realm is very hospitable. Of course, the premise is that you have enough strength." Everyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 1963. The middle-aged man's words caused everyone in the surroundings to be stunned. Damn it. Whether the border realm is hospitable or not depends entirely on their strength. Yi Xian was quite stunned as well. He'd thought that the middle-aged man would go crazy and try to kill him. So that wasn't the case. That's a little out of the ordinary. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. "Young brother, are you interested in going to our border realm?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. "What's your name?" The middle-aged man replied, "Nakayama of Silla." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Nakayama of Silla?" The middle-aged man nodded. "I'm Nakayama of Silla from Daolin Kingdom." "Do you know Daolin Kingdom?" "Oh, you definitely don't. But that's fine. I can tell you that it's called the Border Realm and our Daolin Kingdom is named after it. Do you understand?" All of them were speechless. Nakayama of Silla gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. "Young brother, this world is too limited. Moreover, its martial Dao civilization is too low, and it's truly not suitable for development. Are you interested in going to the Border Realm with me?" When he spoke up to this point, he glanced at Gu Chou. "You can go as well." Gu Chou hesitated for a moment and said, "All of us can go?" Nakayama of Silla shook his head. "I can only take 3 people with me." 3 people? All of them had strange expressions on their faces. Did this fellow come here just to pick people? Gu Chou gazed at Yi Xian. "Are you going?" Yi Xian gazed at Nakayama of Silla. Can we choose not to go? Nakayama of Silla smiled. Of course. However, I have to remind all of you that you killed that old man. Do you know who he is? He's a member of the enforcement sect, and it won't be long before the enforcement sect arrives. At that time they won't be as easy to talk to as I am. Gucho was astounded. So all of you aren't on the same side? Nakayama of Silla spoke seriously. Of course. Everyone. So this guy wasn't in cahoots with the old man. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Senior, why did you bring us here? Nakayama of Silla laughed and said, I think we are wasting time now. I have to remind all of you that the members of the Daolin enforcement sect will arrive in another 10 minutes. At that time all of you will have to face numerous extraordinary experts. Hearing this, Gu Chao's face suddenly became a little ugly. Nakayama of Silla looked at Yi Xian. Especially you. If they find out that you killed their men, they will never let you off. If you are willing to go to the Dao boundary realm with me, I can settle this for you. Yi Xian and Gucho looked at each other. Gucho said solemnly, I'll go. Nakayama of Silla looked at Yi Xian. What about you? Yi Xian laughed bitterly. Do I have any other choice? Nakayama of Silla smiled slightly. I don't think so. At this moment Fan Jian suddenly said, Sir, don't you have another spot? Nakayama of Silla sized Fan Jian up. You want to go? Fan Jian nodded. Nakayama of Silla laughed. Give me a reason. Fan Jian glanced at Gucho and Yi Xian. Why did you choose them? Nakayama of Silla pointed at Gucho. Because he is a genius. With a little nurturing, a super genius will appear in our Daolin nation. Fan Jian pointed at Yi Xian. What about him? Nakayama of Silla glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. There are people behind him. If there are people behind you, they can go with me. Everyone, this chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Fan Jian's expression was slightly unnatural. At this moment, a Mingji saint behind Fan Jian suddenly said, Sir, if you were to choose one of them, who would you choose? Gucho? Yi Xian? Everyone looked at Nakayama of Silla. Nakayama of Silla suddenly waved his right hand. Bang! The Mingji saint who spoke was directly eliminated. Nakayama of Silla laughed. What kind of trash is this? He doesn't have any strength, yet he dares to sow discord in front of me. Really? The Mingji saints behind Fan Jian didn't dare to speak anymore. Nakayama of Silla looked at Yi Xian and Gucho. He smiled. We don't have much time left. Let's go. Gucho turned to look at the evil tribe members. From now on, Gu Bo will be the evil tribe leader. Hearing this, the evil tribe members wanted to say something. Gucho suddenly said, This is my choice. Don't worry, I will be back. The evil tribe members looked at each other and then knelt down in unison. Farewell, tribe leader. They naturally knew that this was a chance for Gucho to change her fate. Gucho changing her fate was equivalent to the evil tribe changing their fate. This was great news. Gucho nodded slightly and then looked at Nakayama of Silla. Let's go. Nakayama of Silla smiled. All right. As he spoke, he led Yi Xian and Gucho towards the sky. Fan Jian and the others had gloomy expressions as they watched Yi Xian and the others leave. No one knew what they were thinking. Xue Linglong looked at Yi Xian, who was in the sky, and just looked at him. After passing through the stone door, Yi Xian and the others started moving swiftly. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Senior, why did you kill the Snow Mountain King? Nakayama of Silla smiled. He was too arrogant and full of himself. There was no point in keeping him alive. Gucho said, Those with a bit of ability are definitely a bit arrogant. The Prince of Zhou Xian faintly smiled. What you say is correct, but in our eyes he doesn't have much ability. Gucho smiled bitterly. I think he is better than me. Nakayama of Silla shook his head. Not necessarily. He has cultivated longer than you. If you were in the same generation as him, you would not lose to him. Moreover, your temperament is better. Yi Xian suddenly said. What about me? Nakayama of Silla glanced at Yi Xian. You are very mysterious. I cannot see through you. Yi Xian said. Then why did you bring me to Daoji? Nakayama of Silla smiled. Just treat it as a good karma. Yi Xian was about to speak. At this moment, 3 powerful auras appeared in the distance. Nakayama of Silla spoke abruptly. Both of you don't need to say anything. I'll do it. As soon as he finished speaking, 3 old men in black robes appeared in front of them. The old man in the lead gazed at Nakayama of Silla. So it's Nakayama of Silla. Nakayama of Silla smiled. So it's Elder Gu-yi from the law enforcement sect. The old man called Gu-yi glanced at Gu-cho and Yi Xian. Nakayama of Silla, who are they? Nakayama of Silla smiled. Now that you mention it, I think of something. The 3 of you want to head down there, right? Gu-yi nodded. Our people died down there. The 3 of us. Nakayama of Silla hurriedly said, I killed them. Gu-yi looked at Nakayama of Silla. Killed them? Nakayama of Silla nodded. It's that Snow Mountain King. You should know this person. He dared to say that he wanted to compete for our Dao Borders resources. He's really reckless. Saying that, he spread out his palm and then gently wiped it. An image appeared in front of everyone. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. It was the process of him killing the Snow Mountain King, but there was no sound. Seeing Nakayama of Silla kill the Snow Mountain King, Gu-yi and the other 2 looked at each other. Finally, Gu-yi said in a deep voice, Is it really this Snow Mountain King who killed our people? Snow Mountain King nodded. Yes. Saying that, he sighed. Unfortunately, I was too late. Otherwise, I would have been able to save your people. Gu-yi glanced at them and Gu-cho. These 2 are, Snow Mountain King smiled. 2 interesting little guys. Their qualifications are not bad. You also know that my Daolin state has been lacking people recently. So there's no way. Gu-yi nodded slightly. Understood. Nakayama of Silla hesitated, then said with a smile. That, you see, I helped your people get revenge. Don't you want to say something? Hearing this, Yi Xian and Gu Chao's expressions became strange. Damn it. Why is this guy like this? Gu-yi and the other 2's expressions also became strange. Gu-yi hesitated, then said, Nakayama of Silla. You. Nakayama of Silla smiled. Not much. Just give me 10 divine ranges. Not much, right? Hearing this, Gu-yi's expression changed drastically. Nakayama of Silla, you are asking for too much. You want 10 divine ranges to kill one of your subordinates? Why don't you just rob them? Nakayama of Silla said. Then 5. Gu-yi said angrily. Impossible. Nakayama of Silla, we didn't ask you to kill for us. You killed them yourself. Nakayama of Silla still wanted to say something, but Gu-yi flicked his sleeve. Farewell. With that, he turned around and left with the 2 beside him. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared into the horizon. Nakayama of Silla looked into the distance and remained silent. Gu-cho asked, Senior, are you still worried? Nakayama of Silla said softly. Just now that old man looked at you 2 a few times. Speaking of this, he looked at Yi Xian. Little guy, I may not be able to protect you. Because next they will definitely go down to investigate, and the fact that you killed that old man will definitely be exposed. Yi Xian fell silent. Nakayama of Silla said. You have to go. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Go where? Nakayama of Silla said in a low voice. There is only one force that doesn't fear the law enforcement sect. That is Spiritual Mountain. You have to go to Spiritual Mountain. As long as you can join Spiritual Mountain and Spiritual Mountain is willing to protect you, then you will be fine. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Spiritual Mountain? Nakayama of Silla nodded. He took out a letter and handed it to Yi Xian. I know an elder of Spiritual Mountain. Her name is Yen Banshan. Go find her and find a way to become her disciple. As long as you can become her disciple, then you won't have to fear the law enforcement sect. Yi Xian was about to speak when Nakayama of Silla suddenly said, Little brother, we are leaving. With that, he disappeared with Gu-cho. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. On the other side, Gu-cho said in a low voice, Senior, why? Nakayama of Silla sighed in a low voice. It's not that I don't want to protect him, but I really can't. Your brother is not simple, especially the sword in his hand. That sword not only exceeds the scope of your world but also the scope of our critical realm. As he said that, he turned his head and looked at the others. He said softly, I also want to ride on his coattails, but there are too many people behind me. I don't want to gamble with the lives of my own people. Let him go and harm Spirit Mountain. P.S. Recently I have been saving the manuscript. Write 3 chapters, publish 2 and keep 1. In this way the manuscript can be saved slowly. Perfect. End of this chapter. Chapter 1964. Spirited Mountain. Yi Xian was stunned when he arrived at Spirited Mountain. Spirited Mountain was just a small hill, and if it wasn't for a tattered wooden sign with the words Spirited Mountain written on it, he would definitely think that he'd gone the wrong way. There were only a few thatched cottages on the hill. Spirited Mountain? Yi Xian felt that it was more suitable to call it Pashan. What should I do? Yi Xian fell silent for a long time before he walked towards Spirited Mountain in the end. Since I'm already here, I should go up and take a look, right? When he arrived at the peak of Spirited Mountain, a tattered thatched cottage entered his eyes, and an old man was sweeping the ground before it. The old man wore very simple clothes and his hair was white. He seemed extremely old. Yi Xian's expression shook when he saw this. Based on his past experience, any old man who swept the ground in such a place was basically a peerless expert. Yi Xian walked over to the old man and bowed slightly. "Greetings, senior." The old man didn't even spare a glance at Yi Xian, and he just ignored him and continued sweeping. Yi Xian didn't feel embarrassed at all. He glanced at the surroundings and said, "Senior, are you the only one on Spirited Mountain?" The old man still didn't speak. Meanwhile, Yi Xian withdrew the green profound sword and passed it to the old man. "Senior, do you think this sword of mine looks nice?" The old man stopped sweeping. He gazed at the sword with a calm expression and he didn't speak as well. Yi Xian said with a serious expression, "Senior, feel it." As he spoke, he passed the sword to the old man. The old man glanced at Yi Xian but still didn't speak. Yi Xian was about to speak when the old man suddenly grabbed the sword. A short moment later, his brows knit together slightly, and then he swiftly let go of the sword. After that, he gazed at Yi Xian silently. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. "Senior, I'm a member of Spirited Mountain from now on." As he spoke, he scanned his surroundings. Soon he arrived in front of a thatched hut. Inside the hut were 5 or 6 memorial tablets. Yi Xian did not care and bowed slightly. "Greetings, ancestral masters. From now on, I, Yi Xian, am a member of Spiritual Mountain. Don't worry, ancestral masters, I will revitalize Spirited Mountain." Behind him, the old man furrowed his brows. However, as if he had thought of something, he glanced at the green profound sword in front of him. Soon his brows slowly relaxed. At that moment, a terrifying aura suddenly came from the sky. However, when the aura was about to approach the Spiritual Mountain, it suddenly disappeared without a trace. An old man had appeared at the foot of the mountain. It was Elder Gu Yi of the law enforcement sect. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw Gu Yi. This fellow really went down to investigate. Gu Yi looked coldly at Yi Xian, then looked at the old man in front of Yi Xian. He cupped his fists and said, "Greetings, Elder Xian, Jr." Hearing this, Yi Xian's eyelids twitched slightly. This old man was really a super mighty figure. Elder Xian glanced at Gu Yi and did not speak. Gu Yi hesitated for a moment and then said, "Elder Xian, this young man killed someone from my law enforcement sect. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Sir, I am now a member of Spiritual Mountain." Gu Yi was slightly stunned and then became furious. "How is that possible? How could Spiritual Mountain accept you?" Yi Xian spread out his hands. "I just joined Spiritual Mountain." Gu Yi stared at Yi Xian. "Spiritual Mountain has not accepted anyone for 3 million years. How could they accept someone like you?" Yi Xian said angrily, "I'm joining unilaterally, can't I?" Hearing this, Gu Yi was stunned. Unilaterally joining? What kind of operation was this? Elder Xian could not help but glance at Yi Xian. A subtle change finally appeared on his calm face. Gu Yi stared at Yi Xian. If this guy was not on Spiritual Mountain, he would have made a move long ago. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. He also wanted to make a move but he did not dare. This was Spiritual Mountain. He could not bear the consequences. But what puzzled him was why Elder Xian tolerated this guy's unreasonable pestering on Spiritual Mountain. At this time, Elder Xian continued to sweep the floor. Gu Yi looked at Yi Xian, his face a little ugly. "Yi Xian, they did not say that they would accept you. How can you have the face to stay up there? Don't you have any shame?" Yi Xian said angrily, "What's the use of this thing? Tell me, what's the use of it?" Gu Yi was stunned. Damn. He had lived for thousands of years and this was the first time he had seen such a shameless person. What kind of weirdo is this? Elder Xian, who was sweeping the floor, could not help but look at Yi Xian again. Gu Yi ignored Yi Xian and looked at Elder Xian instead. "Elder Xian, the sect master asked me to bring this person back. This Elder Xian was expressionless. You are not allowed to fight in the spiritual mountain. Gui was a little troubled. Was the spiritual mountain going to protect this guy? Not allowed to fight. There was no way that Yi Xian would go with him obediently. Thinking until here, he looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, the spiritual mountain did not accept you as a disciple, but you are still here. Aren't you embarrassed? Yi Xian said, Of course I am. Gu Yi said angrily, Can you be more shameless? Yi Xian said, I am shameless. Gu Yi's expression froze and his lungs almost exploded. What kind of weirdo is this? After a while, Gu Yi gradually calmed down. He realized that something was wrong. Why did Elder Xian allow Yi Xian to cause trouble on Spiritual Mountain? That was the crux of the problem. Yi Xian did not care about Gu Yi. He turned around and walked to the side, then sat down cross-legged and entered Xiaota. Cultivate. To him, the most important thing was to increase his strength as soon as possible. Strength was the way to go. Seeing Yi Xian enter Xiaota to cultivate, Gu Yi's expression turned ugly. Gu Yi looked at the old man and hesitated. Elder Xian, you. Elder Xian ignored him and turned around to continue sweeping the floor. After a moment of silence, a ruthless look flashed in Gu Yi's eyes. He decided to give it a try. Since Elder Xian could let Yi Xian cause trouble on Spiritual Mountain, Elder Xian might not attack him even if he attacked. Be bold. Thinking until here, Gu Yi suddenly disappeared and went straight to where Yi Xian was on Spiritual Mountain. Just as he was about to approach Yi Xian, Elder Xian suddenly flicked his sleeves. Boom. A white light flashed and Gu Yi was sent back to his original position. When he stopped, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Gu Yi was stunned. He looked at Elder Xian on the mountain. Elder Xian. Elder Xian looked at Gu Yi coldly. If you attack again, I'll destroy your soul. Gu Yi was a little confused. Why, Elder Xian? Why didn't you attack him? But me. Elder Xian looked at Gu Yi and narrowed his eyes. Get lost. Gu Yi was shocked and didn't dare to say anything else. He immediately turned around and left. On Spiritual Mountain, Elder Xian glanced at the place where he was sitting and remained silent. On the other side of the mountain range, Gu Yi stopped and his expression was extremely ugly. After a moment he turned around and looked in the direction of Spiritual Mountain, then turned around and left. This matter was no longer something he could handle. Because now Spiritual Mountain had made it clear that they wanted to protect Yi Xian. On Spiritual Mountain inside Xiaota, Yi Xian felt a little pain in the ass because this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Now that he was at the life-body realm, not to mention at the Dao boundary, even below it his realm was very low. And at this critical level it was even lower than that. He had to find a way to improve his realm and soar Dao. Cultivation. In the following time Yi Xian began to cultivate crazily. Anyway, he had enough cultivation resources. After the fall of the Snow Mountain King, all his resources had fallen into his hands. Now he was as rich as a country. Inside Xiaota, cultivation knew no time. In the blink of an eye, decades had passed. At this moment he had reached the Life Soul realm. Next he began to break through to the Life God realm. While cultivating he did not stay idle. He walked around the entire Spiritual Mountain. Of course, Spiritual Mountain was not big to begin with. And in a straw hut on Spiritual Mountain he found some ancient books. They were not martial arts techniques but some miscellaneous books. From these books he had a rough understanding of this boundary in Spiritual Mountain. This boundary of martial arts civilization was considered to be level 9, which was the highest known civilization except for the God Realm civilization. Below this boundary there were countless universes. However, the people in these universes were all sealed by this boundary. Just like the burial zone, the people below could not sense the existence of this boundary, and the boundary of Dao boundary had no interest in the lower realm. In fact, Dao boundary used to be a civilization below level 9. However, for a period of time, a super genius appeared in Dao boundary, Jun Daolin. This person created an unprecedented realm. None. What was none? It was to completely jump out of the realm and not be bound by the realm. My heart is at ease. My mind is at ease. My body is at ease. My soul is at ease. My Dao is at ease. What was freedom? Ignoring space and time. Ignoring time. Ignoring life. Ignoring the great Dao. Jumping out of everything, thus being freedom. This was the martial arts concept that Jun Daolin had proposed. And he was also the first peerless expert in history to jump out of the realm and reach great freedom. Limitless realm. Precisely because of this, he brought Dao Boundary to become a level 9 civilization. Dao Boundary was not originally called Dao Boundary, but to commemorate this peerless expert, this world was renamed Dao Boundary. Ever since Jun Daolin, no one else had reached Limitless Realm, because it was too difficult. Even Dao Boundary's legendary figure, Dao Ling, had only reached half-step Limitless Realm, and Dao Ling was the founder of Spirit Mountain. Dao Ling was also a super terrifying existence. It was said that she had used less than 30 years to reach half-step Limitless Realm. Seeing this, Xian could not help but sweat. 30 years. Damn it. What kind of cheat is this? Dao Ling was also the peerless expert who had the highest chance of reaching Limitless Realm. However, 1,000,000 years ago, Dao Ling suddenly left Spirit Mountain, leaving only one disciple behind. That day, everyone thought that Dao Ling had reached Limitless Realm, but when she left there was no movement at all. No one knew where she went and no one knew if she had reached Limitless Realm. Inside the straw hut, Xian closed the ancient book in his hands and fell silent. Limitless Realm. He turned to look at the sky outside the straw hut, and a trace of confusion flashed in his eyes. This limitless realm of Dao Boundary seemed to be a little close to Qing'er and his father. Was his life as a second generation coming to an end? Would his father be beaten to death by others? The green-robed man. End of this chapter. Chapter 1965. The days of cultivation were boring, but no matter how boring it was, he still had to cultivate. Xian already felt pressured when he had learned about this borderline. Even if this boundary wasn't at the level of his father and Qing'er, it was definitely close. In other words, his life as a second generation might never return. What was worth mentioning was that while Xian was cultivating, Xianxia had already reached the life-knowing state. Just as he expected, Sister Shue's life-knowing state was not an ordinary life-knowing state. Her current level was even higher than the 12 life-knowing saints, perhaps only below the King of Snow Mountain and Guqiu. Other than that, Xuang had also reached the life-knowing state. Xian didn't let the two girls out because it was too dangerous outside. However, he didn't expect Sister Shui to sneak out. He was furious. Xiao Ta said, "Young master, instead of worrying about the Snow Lord, you should worry about yourself. Anyway, from what I know, the Snow Lord is master's favorite. Master will never let her be in danger. As for you, you know." Xian's face darkened. "Know your sister." If not for the fact that he had to cultivate in Xiao Ta's body, he would have sold Xiao Ta. Ignoring the broken tower, Xian started cultivating with Xuang. He decided to nurture Xuang into a super swordsman. He was one of them. He had to be nurtured well. About 10 years later, Xian reached the Life God realm. On this day, Xian, who had reached the Life God realm, left the tiny pagoda. He roasted a lamb and brought it to Elder Xian. He realized that Elder Xian did nothing but sweep the floor every day. Xian tore off a lamb leg and passed it to Elder Xian. "Elder Xian, eat." Elder Xian looked at Xian and didn't refuse. He took the lamb leg and started eating. Xian looked around and asked, "Elder Xian, are you the only one on Spiritual Mountain?" Elder Xian said, "There's one more." Xian was a little curious. "Who is it?" Elder Xian didn't say anything. Xian laughed. "Elder Xian, can I ask you a few questions?" Elder Xian still didn't speak. Xian asked, "Elder Xian, in the world below us, destiny awareness is the highest known state. Can you tell us about the state system here?" As he spoke, he tore off a leg of lamb and passed it to Elder Xian. Elder Xian didn't reject it. After taking a few bites, he said, "Heartless, thoughtless, bodiless, soulless, Taoless nihility." Xian frowned slightly. "The limitless realm is the limitless realm that Jun Daolin attained all those years ago?" Elder Xian nodded. Xian glanced at Elder Xian. "What realm is Elder Xian?" Elder Xian didn't say anything. Xian was tactful and didn't probe further. Soon, the two of them devoured the goat cleanly in no time. When they were done, Xian rose to his feet and returned to the pagoda to cultivate. Suddenly, Elder Xian asked, "That sword of yours?" The corner of Xian's mouth twitched. This old man couldn't resist asking after all. Xian turned to Elder Xian and said seriously, "Elder Xian, are you interested in this sword?" Elder Xian glanced at the azure profound sword in Xian's hand. "Danger. Danger." Xian fell silent. It was obvious that Elder Xian had sensed Qing'er from the azure profound sword when he touched it. But he was a little puzzled. With Qing'er's strength, no one should be able to sense her. Could it be that Qing'er has been paying attention to me all this time? Yi Xian's heart was filled with joy. Elder Xian suddenly said, "Don't go down the mountain." With that he turned and left. Go down the mountain. Yi Xian turned and looked down the mountain. Soon he sensed a powerful aura in the mountains. Qingqing, Yi family's ancestral shrine. Ancestors above, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as crown prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The speaker was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This young man was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi family's elders. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. The little girl's name was Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the family wanted to remove Yi Xian, she ignored her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl named Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral shrine and said timidly, "Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a crown prince. Why did you discard him for no reason?" The great elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. "This is a family matter. Why are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was afraid and didn't dare to look at the great elder, but she didn't leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral shrine. She bowed again to the elders on both sides. "Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li family for the mining rights in Nanshan. He's fighting for the family and we don't know if he's dead or alive. But the family is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is really unfair." "Impudent," the great elder suddenly said angrily. "It's not up to a little girl like you to decide whether to discard him or not. Men, drag her away." At this moment the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly smiled and said, "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder said coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi family rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the family for so many years. Even now he's fighting for the family. The family is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang. He knew it was his chance to show off. The guard sneered, "Young master, Yi Lang inherits the title of crown prince. Why are you shouting?" He raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded. The right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. But she didn't cry. She just covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "I'm Zhang Mu." "Greetings, Crown Prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're good. After I become the Crown Prince, I'll need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed deeply. "I'm willing to go through fire and water for the Crown Prince." Yi Lang nodded slightly. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show any mercy. Do you understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking toward the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the South Mountain. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you, Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and said, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked up to Yi Ling. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the elders of the Yi clan. "Why?" At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you discard him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the great elder, but she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and entered the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides. "Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He's fighting for the clan and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is unfair." Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he discards his position or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog her 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young master, Yi Lang inherits the prince's position. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry. She just held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He quickly bowed deeply. "This subordinate will go through fire and water for the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back. Do you understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yiling did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu again. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you?" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and said, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me." Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked up to Yiling. Seeing Yiling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Chapter 1966. Yi Xian glanced at the old man who pointed in that direction. In the next moment a sword suddenly flashed. The old man's expression changed drastically. He suddenly clenched his right hand, and then a powerful force swept out from his palm. The green profound sword slashed down. The green profound sword pierced through the old man's palm, and a strand of fresh blood sprayed out. However, the old man had already turned around and fled. The other old man had fled as well. He fled. Yi Xian fell silent when he saw this. If a heartless expert didn't fight him and only wanted to flee, then it would be difficult for him to instantly kill the expert unless he caught the expert off guard. So long as the expert was on guard, then it would be difficult for him to instantly kill the expert. A short moment later, Yi Xian turned around and walked back to Spirited Mountain. When he returned to Spirited Mountain, Elder Xian suddenly asked, "How did you cultivate so quickly?" Yi Xian smiled. "An extraordinary genius." He naturally wouldn't expose Xiao Ta's secret. What a joke. Xiao Ta's ability was heaven-defying. Once it was exposed, then there would probably be countless troubles. Don't expose your wealth. Elder Xian gazed at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian took out another lamb to roast and then he said, "Senior, what sort of power is the law enforcement sect?" He'd already formed a grudge with the law enforcement sect, so he had to get to know this power well. Elder Xian fell silent for a short moment before he said, "I don't know." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "You don't know?" Elder Xian nodded. "I haven't left the mountain for many years." Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. "You wouldn't be sweeping here every single day, right?" Elder Xian smiled. "Yes." Yi Xian asked, "How many years have you been sweeping for?" Elder Xian thought for a moment and said, 9 million years. Yi Xian's expression froze when he heard this. Sweeping for 9 million years. How terrifying. Elder Xian glanced at Yi Xian. "The mountain master has returned. Go down the mountain." Yi Xian frowned. "Is it Mountain Lord Yan of Mount Yanbian?" Elder Xian nodded. "That girl's temper isn't very good. She might not like you, so it's best that you leave the mountain." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why don't you like me?" Elder Xian said, "You talk a lot and you're very flowery." Yi Xian was speechless. At this time Elder Xian said, "Why did you come to our Xian mountain?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment then said, "Nakayama of Silla told me to come. He told me to become Miss Bian Shan's disciple." Elder Xian furrowed his brow. "Nakayama of Silla?" Yi Xian nodded. Elder Xian remained silent for a moment before saying, "He might be trying to trick you." Yi Xian was speechless. Elder Xian said, "The Mountain Lord has a bad temper. Furthermore, she will never accept you as her disciple." Yi Xian frowned. "Am I not outstanding enough?" Elder Xian hesitated for a moment then said, "You're indeed not outstanding enough." Yi Xian's face darkened. Does this old man know how to speak? Elder Xian said again, "Let's go." Yi Xian thought for a moment then nodded. "All right." As he spoke he stood up, bowed slightly, then turned and walked down the mountain. But after a while he returned to Elder Xian. Elder Xian looked at Yi Xian. "What are you doing?" Yi Xian pointed at the foot of the mountain. "There are many experts from the law enforcement sect." Elder Xian turned his head to look. At the foot of the mountain, 2 elders and a middle-aged man had appeared out of nowhere. The middle-aged man wore a dark golden robe and held a long halberd in his hand. Elder Xian said, "Thoughtless state." Yi Xian nodded. "He's much stronger than Gui just now." Elder Xian looked at Yi Xian but did not speak. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment then said, "Can I stay here for a few more days?" "Just 5 days." Elder Xian said, "Up to you." Yi Xian was overjoyed. At this moment Elder Xian said, "But I have to remind you that the Mountain Lord might return at any time. Once she does you might be in big trouble." "Mountain Lord?" Yi Xian thought for a moment then said, "I shouldn't be that unlucky." With that he turned and walked into a straw hut, then began cultivating. This time he did not choose to break through to the thoughtless state. Instead he cultivated his flying sword of life and death. When he attacked just now he realized that his flying sword of life and death could actually be faster, especially since the green profound sword had been strengthened. Moreover, it could ignore time and space. Fast. His goal was very simple. Could be described in one word. Fast. Extremely fast. At the foot of the Spirit Mountain, the middle-aged man with the long halberd looked at the Spirit Mountain. No one knew what he was thinking. An old man said in a low voice, "Elder Gu, the Spirit Mountain intends to protect Yi Xian." Elder Gu's face was expressionless. "Then what can you do?" The old man's expression was slightly unsightly. They really couldn't do anything. There were very few people on the Spirit Mountain, only 2. However, no power in the entire burial zone dared to offend them rashly. Besides the invincible Dao Ling from all those years ago, even Yan Bianshan was a terrifying figure. Elder Gu looked at the Spirit Mountain and said softly, "According to what I know, that young man was only at the life-body realm before this. However, he attained the life-knowledge realm in a short period of half a month. Moreover, he was able to instantly kill Elder Gu Yi. Even though he killed Elder Gu Yi by surprise, he's still not simple." The old man nodded. "The main reason is the sword in his hand. We've analyzed it before. There are 3 reasons why Elder Gu Yi was killed. First, he underestimated Yi Xian's strength. Second, he wasn't on guard and was killed by Yi Xian by surprise. Third, it's because of the sword in Yi Xian's hand. That sword can ignore the space-time prison that Elder Gu Yi set up. In fact, the most important thing is that sword. That sword is really special." Elder Gu said softly, "It's hard to imagine that such a terrifying sword could appear in the world below." The old man nodded. "We're also doing our best to investigate the sword's origin." Elder Gu looked at the old man. "Have you found anything?" The old man said in a low voice, "This sword was made by a woman and it's said that she's Yi Xian's sister." Elder Gu frowned. "That's it?" The old man nodded. "We've investigated a lot about Yi Xian, but that plain-dressed woman," Elder Gu said, "you can't find her?" The old man nodded. "We can't find her at all. However, we've received news that if you obtain the sword in Yi Xian's hand, you'll be able to sense the plain-dressed woman through the sword." Elder Gu frowned. "That's possible?" The old man nodded. "Yes. As long as you hold the sword in his hand, you'll be able to sense the woman who made it through the sword." Elder Gu nodded. "Understood." On Mount Ling inside Shao, Yi Xian had been practicing the flying sword to determine life and death every day. In order to reach the maximum speed of his sword, he entered the mysterious space-time abyss to practice. When he was practicing inside, he realized that it had a miraculous effect. In the mysterious space-time abyss, the space-time density was extremely thick. The speed of the green profound sword in the mysterious space-time abyss was different from the outside world. In there, its speed was several times slower. In fact, Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Logically speaking, the green profound sword could ignore the mysterious spacetime, so why was it slower in the spacetime abyss? He did not think too much about it. In any case, he would practice it first. He also let Su Wang practice with him. He also taught Su Wang the flying sword soul fixation. He had never thought of holding back when it came to this girl. After all, they were on the same side. Keep the goodies within the family. In the following days, Yi Xian practiced crazily every day. In the space-time abyss, his flying sword's speed became faster and faster. His goal was to make the flying sword's speed in the space-time abyss be as fast as the outside world. If he could cultivate the sword's speed to be as fast as the outside world, then after he left this mysterious space-time, his flying sword's speed would be. At the thought of this, Yi Xian could not help but feel excited. Just like that, days passed, and in the blink of an eye, more than 10 years had passed. After more than 10 years of hard work, the speed of Yi Xian's flying sword was already as fast as the outside world. After leaving the mysterious abyss, Yi Xian's mind moved and the sword suddenly appeared 10,000 feet away. Looking at the green profound sword that was 10,000 feet away, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth raised slightly. His smile gradually widened. In the end he could not help but laugh out loud. The speed of his flying sword was at least several times faster than before. If he were to face Heartless now, he was completely confident that he could kill the other party in an instant, even if the other party was on guard. Invincible. Yi Xian laughed out loud. At this time Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young master, I dare to swear on master's head that you will definitely not be handsome for more than 3 seconds." Yi Xian's smile froze. "Xiao Ta, you are not just ordinary arrogant. Do you really not put father in your eyes now?" Xiao Ta said in a deep voice, "I am still very respectful to master. Also, I was modified by Sister Tianming." Yi Xian shook his head. Damn it, this Xiao Ta will be beaten into a pulp by father sooner or later. Even he didn't dare use the Qing to pressure his father. Yet this small pagoda wanted to use the Qing to pressure his father every single day. It was really walking further and further down the path of courting death. Without entangling with this Xiao Ta, Yi Xian left Xiao Ta and walked down the mountain. At this time Elder Xian looked at Yi Xian. "You concealed your aura." Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." Elder Xian looked at Yi Xian. "The middle-aged man leading below is Thoughtless Realm. Do you know Thoughtless Realm?" Yi Xian laughed. "Aunt." After saying that, he walked down the mountain with large strides, walking with invincible steps. Elder Xian. Very quickly Yi Xian arrived at the foot of the mountain. He looked at Elder Gu in front of him and wanted to attack immediately, but he realized that Elder Gu was staring at him. Not only that, but there was also a terrifying force guarding in front of him. It was not the power of space-time. Yi Xian's face darkened when he saw this. Damn it! This guy was actually so guarded against him. Right at this moment Elder Gu suddenly said, "Yi Xian, we want to see the person behind you?" Yi Xian subconsciously asked, "Which one?" Elder Gu looked at Yi Xian. "How many people are behind you?" Yi Xian said, 3. "My big brother, my father and my sister." Elder Gu glared at Yi Xian. "We want to see your sister, the woman who forged that sword for you." After a moment of silence Yi Xian said, "Your request reminds me of someone." Elder Gu frowned. "Who is it?" Chapter 1967. Needless to say, Yi Xian was a little surprised. Actively looking for Qing? That was a request. How unexpected. Elder Gu asked again, "We want to see the person behind you. Is that okay?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "What do you want to do?" Elder Gu laughed. "What do we want to do? Are you afraid that we'll harm the person behind you? Don't worry, we won't harm the person behind you. We just want to talk to her, that's all." Yi Xian did not speak, but his expression was a little nervous. Although it was only for a moment, Elder Gu and the rest caught it. Panic. Elder Gu smirked. "Yi Xian, don't worry. I promise you again that we won't harm the person behind you. Of course, that's if you cooperate." Yi Xian turned to look at the spiritual mountain. Elder Gu suddenly said, "Escape back to the spiritual mountain?" Yi Xian, think about it. Will the spiritual mountain really become the Enforcer sect's enemy because of you? Moreover, you can escape now, but can you escape forever? Yi Xian looked at Elder Gu. "If I hand over the sword, will you really let me go?" Elder Gu looked at Yi Xian. "Yes." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Swear." Elder Gu thought for a moment, then said, "I swear. As long as you hand over the sword, the Enforcer sect will not trouble you. If I disobey, let my soul be destroyed." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression relaxed. He hesitated for a moment, then opened his palm and the azure profound sword slowly flew to Elder Gu. A glint of excitement flashed in Elder Gu's eyes. He grabbed the green profound sword and slowly closed his eyes. Gradually, the space-time around him disappeared without a trace. Obviously, Yi Xian had authorized him to use it. A moment later, Elder Gu said excitedly, "A divine sword. It's really a divine sword." Yi Xian suddenly said, "Can I go now?" Elder Gu looked at Yi Xian. "Go? Where are we going?" Yi Xian stared at Elder Gu and said, "You said that if I hand over the sword, your law enforcement sect will no longer target me." Elder Gu smiled and said, "Who said we're targeting you? We just want to invite you to the law enforcement sect as a guest." Yi Xian's expression became somewhat ferocious. "You actually went back on your word." Elder Gu laughed heartily. "Yi Xian, you're going to make me laugh to death. I thought you were an outstanding person, but I never expected you to be so stupid." Gu Yi's death was too unjust. Yi Xian clenched his fists like an angry bull. The people behind me will not let you go. Elder Gu looked at the green profound sword in his hand and smiled. Are you talking about that woman? Yi Xian nodded. Elder Gu smiled and said, Come, let me see who this woman behind you is. As he spoke, he held the azure profound sword in his hand and started to sense it. Yi Xian stared at Elder Gu and said, She will kill you. Elder Gu smiled disdainfully. Kill me? What a joke. Do you know what state I am in? I'm at the thoughtless state. At this moment, a sword light descended from the sky. Boom. Elder Gu's voice stopped abruptly. Elder Gu's expression froze. The few elders behind him were shocked as if they had been petrified. On the spiritual mountain, Elder Xian suddenly looked up into the depths of the starry sky, but he saw nothing. Gradually, his expression became solemn. Yi Xian walked in front of Elder Gu and tilted his ear. What did you just say? Thoughtless state? Holy shit, is the thoughtless state so weak? Can't even take one sword? Elder Gu, Yi Xian blinked. Your thoughtless realm isn't fake, is it? Elder Gu gently pulled out the storage ring on Elder Gu's finger and said, Elder Gu Yi, did he die unjustly? Elder Gu stared at Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly slashed with the azure profound sword. Elder Gu's soul was directly absorbed by the azure profound sword. In the distance, the few elders of the enforcement sect were about to run. At this moment, Yi Xian moved his mind. The azure profound sword pierced through the battlefield and the two elders' heads slowly fell to the ground. Clean and neat. Yi Xian took the two elders' storage rings and turned to walk to the spiritual mountain. Elder Xian looked at Yi Xian. You've become stronger again. Yi Xian smiled. Give me 10 years and I'll be invincible. Elder Xian. Yi Xian walked into a straw hut and looked at the 3 storage rings in his hand. There were 3 god veins in the storage rings. During this period of time he had already learned that the main currency in this Dao boundary realm was actually the divine supreme crystal. This was because it was very useful to the experts of the heartless state and above. The saint veins were not very useful to the heartless state. This was also why the people of this Dao boundary realm did not plunder the resources of the lower worlds. There were close to 100,000 divine supreme crystals in the storage rings. Yi Xian put away the storage ring, got up and walked out. He glanced at the foot of the mountain. There was no one from the law enforcement sect there. At this moment, Elder Xian suddenly said, Are you leaving? Yi Xian nodded, Yes. Elder Xian looked at Yi Xian. Have you decided where to go? Yi Xian shook his head. This was his first time coming to this Dao boundary realm. He was still unfamiliar with this place. Elder Xian looked at Yi Xian. Shall I recommend a place for you? Yi Xian shook his head. There's no need. After saying that, he stood up and took out a storage ring and placed it in front of Elder Xian. Elder Xian, there are 50,000 divine supreme crystals in this storage ring. Thank you for your protection during this period of time. I will remember this favor. After saying that, he turned around and walked down the mountain. He had killed several people from the enforcement sect. This was a blood feud. If he continued to stay here, he would only implicate the spiritual mountain. Although the enforcement sect was not afraid of the enforcement sect, it did not mean that they would become enemies with the enforcement sect for him, Yi Xian. Elder Xian looked at Yi Xian, who was walking down the mountain without saying a word. Yi Xian looked around when he had left the spirit mountain. Then he suddenly disappeared from where he was. Not long after Yi Xian left, a woman suddenly appeared at the foot of the spiritual mountain. The woman was wearing a grass skirt and her long hair was scattered behind her back. In her right hand she was holding a bamboo umbrella. After the woman walked up the mountain, Elder Xian quickly stood up and bowed, Mountain Master. The woman turned around and looked at the horizon. The aura of an expert. Elder Xian bowed again and told her what had happened. After a moment of silence, the woman nodded, Got it. After saying that, she walked towards the straw hut. Elder Xian hesitated for a moment before saying, Mountain Master, the sword in that young man's hand is extraordinary. The woman did not even turn her head. It has nothing to do with us. After saying that, she walked into the straw hut and closed the door. Outside the door, Elder Xian smiled bitterly. At this moment, the door suddenly opened and the woman appeared in front of Elder Xian. It can ignore time and space? Elder Xian nodded. After a moment of silence, the woman walked down the mountain. After leaving the spiritual mountain, Yi Xian did not go anywhere else. Instead he went straight to the enforcement sect. He knew very well that after he left the spiritual mountain, the enforcement sect would definitely not let him go and he would not be able to escape. After all, he was unfamiliar with this place. Where could he escape to? Therefore he chose to take the initiative to find the enforcement sect. Don't you want to kill me? I'll take the initiative. Let's do it. Xian flew on his sword and it did not take long for him to arrive at the enforcement sect. The enforcement sect was located in a mountain range surrounded by mountains. The enforcement sect was built on one of the tallest mountains. Looking from below, the mountain towered into the clouds and the top could not be seen at all. When Xian arrived at the foot of the mountain, he looked up and smiled. Enforcement sect, don't you want to kill me? I'm here now. Why isn't anyone here? At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Xian. The old man wore a black robe and his hands were behind his back. His face was as expressionless as a dead man's. Xian looked at the old man and smiled. Tell your sect master to come out. The black-robed old man said, I am. Hearing that, Xian was stunned. The sect master came out just like that. The black-robed old man looked at Xian and did not speak. Xian suddenly smiled. Doesn't the enforcement sect want to kill me? Come on. I'm here, come on. The black-robed old man still did not speak. Xian frowned slightly and it seemed like something was off. As if he'd noticed something, he suddenly turned around and saw a woman sitting on a rock not too far away from him. The woman wore a grass skirt and held a bamboo umbrella in her hand. Who is she? Xian was slightly stunned. Meanwhile, the black-robed old man suddenly said, Welcome, Mountain Chieftain. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. Mountain Chieftain. The corners of Xian's mouth twitched. He knew who this woman was. The Spirit Mountain's Mountain Chieftain Yan Bianshan. Yan Bianshan suddenly stood up and walked over to Xian. Come with me. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Why don't we annihilate the enforcement sect before leaving? The black-robed old man frowned. He looked at Xian and the calm in his eyes had turned icy cold. Yan Bianshan stopped and turned around to look at Xian. You annihilate them, I'll watch. As she spoke, she walked to the side and sat down and she just looked at Xian. Xian's expression froze. Yan Bianshan looked at Xian. Annihilate. I'll watch. Xian was speechless. At the side, the black-robed old man was looking at Xian as well. He was afraid of Yan Bianshan, but the enforcement sect wasn't afraid of her. After all, Yan Bianshan was only one person. Of course, he didn't want to provoke this woman because she was one of the 3 strongest experts in the Dao Edge realm. The most important thing was that she was really alone. This kind of person was the most terrifying because she didn't have any burdens. If she could win, she would fight. If she couldn't, she would run. The enforcement sect couldn't trample Spirited Mountain, right? Even if they could, they wouldn't dare. After all, who was the ancestor of Spirited Mountain? That was Dao Ling, an extraordinary expert. Most importantly, if Yan Bianshan could summon the ancestor. Right at this moment, Yan Bianshan suddenly said, Annihilate. The black-robed old man looked at Xian. Young Master Yi wants to annihilate my enforcement sect? You can do it. Come. My entire sect is waiting. Xian thought for a moment and then he said, Sect Master, I have a green profound sword here. Do you want to take a look? As he spoke, he passed the green profound sword to the black-robed old man. It's very fun, take a look. The black-robed old man was speechless. P.S. Asking for votes. I ask every day in hopes that someone will vote. Chapter 1968. The black-robed elder looked at Xian in front of him. He really wanted to slap this flashy guy to death. However, he couldn't figure out Yan Bianshan's attitude. If he made a move and this woman protected him, then things would become complicated. To fight or not to fight? If he fought, the law enforcement sect really didn't want to provoke this woman. If he didn't fight, it would be embarrassing. At that time, the law enforcement sect would be in a dilemma. The black-robed elder had a headache. At this moment, Xian put away the Xianxia sword. He turned around and walked to Yan Bianshan. He smiled and said, Let's go. He naturally knew that the reason why the other party didn't make a move was because of Yan Bianshan. He had to stop while he was ahead. Otherwise, it would be embarrassing later. He had to know when to stop acting tough. Yan Bianshan glanced at Xian, stood up and left. At this moment, the black-robed elder suddenly said, Young Master Yi. Xian turned around and looked at the black-robed elder. The black-robed elder looked straight at Zhou Xian. This matter isn't over yet. Zhou Xian smiled. If you're not satisfied, then come and destroy my spiritual mountain. My spiritual mountain is waiting for you. The black-robed elder was speechless. Yan Bianshan glanced at Zhou Xian again. Her expression was a little unfriendly. However, she didn't say much. Moments later, the two disappeared into the horizon. The black-robed elder looked at Zhou Xian in the distance. His expression was calm. No one knew what he was thinking. After a long time, he suddenly disappeared. At the end of the horizon, Yan Bianshan suddenly stopped. She looked at Zhou Xian and opened her palm. Sword. Zhou Xian glanced at Yan Bianshan. Then he handed the Xianxia sword to her. Yan Bianshan looked at the Xianxia sword in her hand. Moments later, she handed the sword back to Zhou Xian. Follow me to a place. Zhou Xian hesitated and asked, where is it? Yan Bianshan did not speak. He took him and disappeared from where they stood. Zhou Xian only felt his vision blur as countless white lights flashed in front of him. Soon he suddenly felt his feet land on the ground, and his head felt as heavy as lead. Zhou Xian shook his head with all his might. Then he looked at Yan Bianshan beside him, his heart filled with shock. This woman's strength was terrifying. Yan Bianshan gazed into the distance with a hint of confusion in his eyes. Zhou Xian turned around and looked into the distance. At this moment, he and Yan Bianshan were in front of a cliff. On the opposite side of the cliff was a mountain, and in the belly of the mountain there was a stone door. Zhou Xian was a little curious. This is... Yan Bianshan turned around and looked at Zhou Xian. Lend me your sword. Zhou Xian, on the other hand, did not refuse. He handed the green profound sword to Yan Bianshan. Yan Bianshan held the green profound sword and looked into the distance. In the next moment she took a step forward. With this step she had already arrived in front of the stone door. However, behind her the space-time rippled like water. Zhou Xian hurriedly followed. However, when he was about to approach the stone door, a strange space-time suddenly appeared in front of him. Zhou Xian was shocked. He quickly displayed the mysterious space-time. The mysterious space-time directly suppressed the strange space-time. Up until now, there was no space-time that could compare to the mysterious space-time that Qing'e left for him. Zhou Xian safely walked to the front of the stone door. At this moment, Yan Bianshan kept staring at him. Zhou Xian touched his face. He was a little confused. What's wrong? Yan Bianshan looked at Zhou Xian and frowned slightly. You can come over? Zhou Xian smiled. Why can't I come over? Yan Bianshan looked at Zhou Xian for a long time and said, nothing. With that she walked to the front of the stone door. At this moment the stone door suddenly trembled. Then it directly turned into a strange whirlpool. Yan Bianshan turned to look at Zhou Xian and asked, this sword, it ignores any space-time? Zhou Xian said in a low voice, what are you trying to do? Yan Bianshan pointed at the door. This door is formed by a special space-time. The space-time inside has a strong crushing power. If an outsider enters it, not only will his physical body be crushed instantly, but even his soul will be turned into dust in an instant. Zhou Xian was stunned. Even you can't stop it? Yan Bianshan shook her head. I can't. Zhou Xian was puzzled. But as far as I know, you should be able to surpass space-time, right? Yan Bianshan said, that depends on who set up the space-time. Zhou Xian said in a low voice, this stone door was left by your master? Yan Bianshan nodded. A Daoling. Hearing this, Zhou Xian's expression became serious. He was no stranger to A Daoling. She was a legendary figure like Jun Daolin. Could it be that A Daoling was behind this stone door? At this moment, Yan Bianshan asked again, can this sword really ignore any space-time? Zhou Xian nodded. It can. He had confidence in Qing'e. Yan Bianshan nodded slightly. In the next moment she held the sword and stabbed forward. The Xian profound sword stabbed into the space-time whirlpool. Boom! The space-time whirlpool violently trembled. Gradually the space-time whirlpool became illusory and transparent. Seeing this, Yan Bianshan's expression changed subtly. This sword really can ignore space-time. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but look at Zhou Xian. At this moment she was a little curious about Zhou Xian's background. At this moment the space-time whirlpool suddenly disappeared. A stone path appeared in front of the two. Yan Bianshan hurriedly returned the sword to Zhou Xian, and then she walked towards the stone path. Zhou Xian put away the Xian profound sword and hurriedly followed her. The two of them walked down the stone path, and it wasn't long before they arrived at a cave. The cave was very large, and its surroundings were inlaid with glistening jade stones. Thus the view inside the cave was very good. Moreover, there was a faint fragrance coming from within the cave. At this moment Yan Bianshan suddenly stopped. She looked into the distance and there was a coffin there. Yan Bianshan was slightly stunned when she saw the coffin. Her right hand started to tremble. Moreover, her face was slightly pale. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian frowned slightly. Did Dao Ling die? At this moment the coffin suddenly disappeared, and a woman appeared in front of Yan Bianshan and Yi Xian. The woman wore a white dress and her long hair was tied into braids. She looked quite playful. Yan Bianshan was slightly stunned when she saw the woman, and then she bowed respectfully and said with a trembling voice, "Master, Master." Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he heard this. That's the super monstrous genius, Dao Ling. However, he noticed that the woman before him wasn't her main body. Dao Ling looked at Yan Bianshan and smiled playfully. "Little Bianshan, did you think that Master had died the moment you saw the coffin?" Yan Bianshan looked at Dao Ling with an extremely firm expression. "No one can kill Master." Dao Ling roared with laughter and then she said, "Little Bianshan, you surprised me. Because logically speaking, you should have reached the half-step inactive realm in order to open the spatial door I set up. But you're still at the Daoist realm." Yan Bianshan turned to look at Yi Xian. It's the sword in his hand. Dao Ling looked at Yi Xian with a spurious smile. Yi Xian hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Greetings, big sister." Yan Bianshan was speechless. "Big sister?" Dao Ling blinked and her smile was slightly strange. "You called me big sister?" Yi Xian hurriedly said, "To tell you the truth, I stayed at Spirited Mountain for a period of time, and I've admired Senior for a long time. Seeing Senior today, I was so excited that I spoke without thinking. Please forgive me, Senior." Dao Ling shook her head and smiled brilliantly. "What a showy little fellow, your glib tongue is really good." As she spoke, she opened her palm, and the Cyan Profound Sword in Yi Xian's hand flew into her hand. Looking at the Cyan Profound Sword, the smile on Dao Ling's face gradually vanished, and a rare trace of seriousness appeared in her eyes. After a long time, Dao Ling looked at Yi Xian. "Who forged this sword?" Yi Xian said, "Hi sister." Dao Ling frowned slightly. "Your sister?" Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." Dao Ling was silent for a moment and then she smiled. "You said you admire me?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then he said, "Yes. I admire you, Senior." Dao Ling laughed. "Didn't you call me sister just now? All right, I'll acknowledge you as my younger brother." Yi Xian's expression froze. "Yan Bianshan." Dao Ling blinked. "Why, you're not willing?" Yi Xian hurriedly said, "I'm willing. Very willing. Hello, sister." Dao Ling laughed and she sized up Yi Xian's Cyan Profound Sword and then she smiled. "Little fellow, do you know what this sword contains?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "The way of space-time." Dao Ling shook her head. "Only one of them." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "There's something else?" Dao Ling nodded. "There's another unknown mysterious power, but it's sealed. However, if this sword is upgraded again, this power will be unsealed. Of course, with your current strength, I'm afraid it's difficult for you to control this power." Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, "It's fine anyway, I never rely on external objects. I don't use this sword often either." "Little soul." Dao Ling laughed. "Little fellow, you're really interesting, your personality suits me very well." With that she opened her palm and the Cyan Profound Sword flew back to Yi Xian. Yi Xian put away the Cyan Profound Sword and he hesitated and then said, "Sister, can I ask you a question?" Dao Ling smiled slightly. "You want to ask me between me and the person who created this sword who's stronger and who's weaker, right?" Yi Xian nodded. Dao Ling smiled. "A sword she casually created can break the space-time I set up, what do you think?" Yi Xian wanted to say something but he stopped. In fact, what he wanted to ask the most was whether Dao Ling could sense Qing'er's true strength. After he came to this Dao boundary, he felt that this world might be close to Qing'er and his father. Because Qing'er and his father didn't have a realm at the time. And this Dao boundary's inaction realm was very similar to the no realm that Qing'er and his father said. However, he still didn't ask because it was too abrupt. One must have a sense of propriety when speaking and acting. At this moment Yan Bianshan suddenly asked, "Master, where did you go?" Dao Ling's gaze shifted from Yi Xian to Yan Bianshan and she smiled. A fun place. Yan Bianshan wanted to ask something but Dao Ling shook her head. When you're strong enough you'll naturally know. Right now it's meaningless for you to know that. You only need to understand one thing and that is to cultivate hard and reach the inaction realm. Yan Bianshan nodded slightly and didn't ask anything else. At this moment, Dao Ling opened her palm, and a storage ring slowly floated in front of Yan Bianshan. The things in this ring are helpful to you if you're lucky enough, you might be able to reach the inaction realm. As she spoke she sized up Yan Bianshan and smiled. Your foundation is very solid, it won't be difficult to reach the inaction realm. Inaction realm. Yan Bianshan's pupils suddenly constricted. This? Master has already reached the inaction realm? Yi Xian was also shocked. After all, this Dao Ling had always been rumored to have reached the inaction realm, but no one knew if she had really reached the inaction realm, but now it seemed that she had clearly reached the inaction realm. Dao Ling's lips curled up. Do you know why I left back then? After a moment of silence, Yan Bianshan said with a trembling voice. When Master left back then, you had already reached the inaction realm. Dao Ling nodded and smiled. Yes. When you reach the inaction realm it'll be a little boring at first because the people around you are like ants to you. The difference between those below and those in the inaction realm is too great. How great is it? It's like the sky and the earth. When you reach the inaction realm back then, you'll find that everything around you is meaningless. Because you're an invincible existence. Of course don't worry, this boring feeling will disappear soon. Because you'll discover a new world. Yi Xian was a little curious. What new world? Dao Ling smiled. Humans are like a small cell in our body. Do you understand what I mean? Faster see. At this moment Xiao Ta suddenly jumped up. She actually knows this. Yi Xian frowned slightly and said in his heart, how do you know? Xiao Ta said in a low voice, this woman at least knows the organization structure of life. At this moment, Dao Ling smiled. This Xiao Ta in your body is interesting. Yi Xian was shocked. Senior can hear what it says? Dao Ling smiled faintly. What do you think? Yi Xian. Dao Ling looked at Yi Xian and smiled. All living beings are insignificant. In this endless universe humans are like a small cell in the body. In fact, they're even smaller. Just like the Tao critical point, it's not small, but in the entire universe, it's as small as a speck of dust. The universe has no end and the great Tao has no end. The so-called surpassing the great Tao, surpassing destiny, are actually all illusory. Yi Xian said in a low voice. In that case it's endless. Dao Ling smiled. You can say that because no one knows the end of the universe. Yi Xian was silent. Did Qing and the others know the end of the universe? Obviously they didn't. If they knew, the three of them wouldn't continue forward. At this moment, Dao Ling suddenly smiled. All right. It's basically over. Now I'm going to meet this sister of yours. Yi Xian looked at Dao Ling stunned. Meet Qing. Dao Ling smiled. Yes. Could it be that he had encountered such a mysterious super expert? How could he not meet him? When I come back I'll give you another gift. Yi Xian said subconsciously. You should give it first. Dao Ling. Chapter 1969. After saying that, Yi Xian regretted it. That was a little disrespectful. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Dao Ling was slightly startled and then she laughed. Sure, I'll give it to you first. With that she pointed with her finger and a white light entered between Yi Xian's eyebrows. Boom. Yi Xian's body trembled violently, and countless information surged into his mind. At this moment, Dao Ling smiled and said, one is my inheritance and it can help you cultivate more smoothly. The other is my understanding of your sword. You can use this sword according to the method I gave you and you'll be pleasantly surprised. With that she slowly floated up. At the side, Yan Bianshan bowed slightly and said seriously, Master, I will look for you. Dao Ling smiled and then looked at Yi Xian. Little guy, can you do me a favor? Yi Xian looked at Dao Ling. What favor? Dao Ling said, Bianshan received my insights and should be able to reach the inaction state. But during this process she needs someone to protect her. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then said, there shouldn't be anyone who is an enemy of spiritual mountain, right? Dao Ling smiled. Are you not willing? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. It's not that I'm unwilling, but I feel that if someone dares to attack Miss Bianshan with my strength. Dao Ling smiled. Just do your best. If you really can't beat them you can leave. Is that okay? Yi Xian thought for a moment and then nodded. I'll do my best. Dao Ling's lips curled up. Little guy, take care. And you, Bianshan, I look forward to you reaching the inaction state. With that, she suddenly disappeared, and when she reappeared, she was already deep in an endless starry sky. In the depths of the starry sky, Dao Ling looked up. Her gaze pierced through countless starfields, and the corners of her lips curled up. Let me see who you are. Finally, she saw a plain dress, and at this moment, a sword light suddenly entered between her eyebrows. In the cave. Yan Bianshan said in a low voice, Master went to find your sister? Yi Xian nodded. Probably. Yan Bianshan said softly, what do you think Master's chances are? Yi Xian was speechless. Yan Bianshan looked at Yi Xian. Why aren't you saying anything? Yi Xian was a little helpless. Let's go. With that, he turned and left. They were all on the same side, so there was no need to act. Seeing Yi Xian leave, Yan Bianshan frowned slightly. However, she did not say much and left with him. Not long after the two of them left the cave, a black-robed old man appeared on the scene. The person who had arrived was the sect leader of the enforcement sect, Xiao. Who was the Xiao? Xiao, the sect. The person who came was the world lord Zhou of the Cloud World, another superpower in Daoji Kingdom. Zhou looked at Xiao and smiled. Sect Master Xiao, I didn't expect you to be paying attention to this place. Xiao said, how can I not pay attention to the last place Senior Dao Ling appeared? Moreover, this mountain lord would come here every once in a while. I just didn't expect her to actually enter this time. Zhou smiled. As far as I know, the sword in that young man's hand can ignore any space-time. Can even ignore the space-time left by Senior Dao Ling. This sword is not simple. Xiao looked calm. No one knew what she was thinking. At this moment, Zhou changed the topic. Sect Master Xiao, as far as I know, this person killed several elders of your sect. Xiao was expressionless. If the mountain lord gets Dao Ling's inheritance. Zhou smiled. So what? Dao Ling hasn't reached the inaction realm anyway. Xiao looked at Zhou. Do you believe that? Zhou was silent. In fact, they all thought that Dao Ling had reached the inaction realm. Why did Jun Daolin suddenly disappear? According to the successor of Jun Daolin, the reason why Jun Daolin left was because he felt that he had no opponents in the world after reaching the inaction realm. Why did Dao Ling leave? Obviously she had reached the inaction realm. Xiao said, in other words, Mountain Lord Yan has the inheritance of an inaction realm expert. Hearing this, Zhou smiled. Sect Master Xiao, your idea is very dangerous. Xiao looked at Zhou. With our talent and potential, can we reach the inaction realm in this life? Zhou was silent for a moment. Difficult. 3 difficult. Xiao nodded. Strictly speaking, there's basically no chance. But what if we get the inheritance of Senior Dao Ling? Will we have a chance? Zhou narrowed his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Xiao continued, this is our only chance. Zhou smiled. Then how do you think we should cooperate? Xiao said softly, when she reaches the inaction realm, we will make our move. Zhou said in a low voice, what if Dao Ling? Xiao was silent for a moment. A ruthless look flashed in her eyes. I bet she won't appear. Zhou asked again. That young man. He's an uncertain factor. Xiao's eyes flashed coldly. Kill him first. Zhou asked again. Do we need to contact Jun Daolin? Xiao shook her head. No need. That Nakayama of Silla has always been prudent in defending the city. He won't do such a risky thing. Zhou said softly, that's true. Spiritual Mountain. After Yi Xian and Yan Bianshan returned to Spiritual Mountain, Yan Bianshan walked to his straw hut. Yi Xian suddenly said, are you going to reach the inaction realm? Yan Bianshan nodded. Yi Xian sighed. Mountain Lord Yan, are you going to reach the inaction realm just like that? Yan Bianshan turned to look at Yi Xian. Is there a problem? Yi Xian said in a low voice. Mountain Lord Yan, have you ever thought about what if someone ambushes you when you are trying to reach the inaction realm? Yan Bianshan frowned. Yi Xian was relieved. Fortunately, this woman didn't say something stupid like, how is it possible? Otherwise he would have turned around and left. Although he promised Dao Ling that he would protect this woman, it didn't mean that he would do it brainlessly. If he was not fully prepared and stayed here to help this woman, would he be able to leave if someone attacked? Yan Bianshan looked at Yi Xian. Do you have any suggestions? Yi Xian looked around. Yan Bianshan suddenly said, there are no outsiders within 1,000,000 miles. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Do you have any friends? The stronger ones. Yan Bianshan pointed at Elder Xian who was not far away. Yi Xian asked, anything else? Yan Bianshan shook his head. Yi Xian sighed in his heart. He was a loner. Yi Xian asked again, do the law enforcement sect Yunjie and Jun Daogua know about the mystic realm? Yan Bianshan nodded. Yes. Yi Xian said in a low voice, if I'm not wrong they already know that you and I entered the mystic realm. In other words, they will definitely guess if we obtain Dao Ling's inheritance. Do you think they can resist the temptation of Senior Dao Ling's inheritance? Yan Bianshan shook his head. No. Yi Xian nodded. In other words, they might join forces to snatch it. Hearing that, Yan Bianshan frowned. At this moment, Elder Xian said in a low voice, young Master Yi is right. The law enforcement sect Yunjie and Daogua definitely won't just sit by and watch you reach the inaction realm. Yan Bianshan looked at Yi Xian. Do you have any ideas? Yi Xian thought about it and shook his head. There's no way because you don't have any friends. You're all alone. Speaking up to this point, he paused and said, can you summon your ancestor? Yan Bianshan shook his head. Yi Xian was in complete despair. Damn it. Others can summon their ancestor, so why can't you? Yan Bianshan said, Master said that you have to protect me. Yi Xian's face darkened. Do you think I can defeat so many of them? Yan Bianshan said, I believe you. Yi Xian was stunned. You believe me? Yan Bianshan nodded. I believe Master and Master believes you. So I believe you. Yi Xian was speechless. Yan Bianshan continued. I have to charge into the inaction realm because even if I don't, they will still attack us. Am I right? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Yan Bianshan said, once I reach the inaction realm, they are all ants. Yi Xian said in a low voice, can you reach the inaction realm in 2 hours? Yan Bianshan shook his head. At least 3,000,000 years. 3,000,000 years. Yi Xian sighed. By the time you reach the inaction realm, the grass on my and Elder Xian's graves will be dozens of feet tall. Yan Bianshan just looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian was silent. Yan Bianshan suddenly said, do you want to escape? Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. How did this woman know what he was thinking? Yan Bianshan said, if you want to leave then leave. You don't owe me anything. With that she turned and walked towards the thatched hut. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, I have an idea. Yan Bianshan turned and looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said in a low voice, I will take you and escape. Yan Bianshan frowned. What do you mean? Yi Xian disappeared with Yan Bianshan. When they appeared again, the two were already inside the Xiaota. When they entered the Xiaota, Yan Bianshan was stunned. Gradually her expression became serious. The time here and the time outside. Yi Xian looked at Yan Bianshan. You only need 1 month to cultivate here. 1 month, is that okay? Yan Bianshan nodded. With that she looked at Yi Xian. Can you block for me for 1 month? Yi Xian was silent for a moment and said, I will try my best. Actually, he knew that if he escaped alone, it would be even more dangerous. He and Yan Bianshan entered the secret realm together. Would they let him go? Definitely not. Especially the law enforcement sect. They might be thinking about how to deal with him. If Yan Bianshan reached the inaction realm, there would still be a chance of survival. Yi Xian left the Xiaota. He looked around and then looked at Elder Xian. Elder Xian, you stay here and guard for as long as you can. If you can't, don't defend to the death. Understand? Elder Xian nodded. Understood. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Then he turned into a ray of sword light and soared into the sky. In the distant sky, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. Not far in front of him was Xiao. Xiao looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, where are you going? Work hard to save. Chapter 1970. Looking at Xiao in front of him, Yi Xian smiled. I think you must be curious about whether we got the inheritance of Senior Dao Ling in that secret realm. Xiao nodded. I am. Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Yan will reach the inaction realm soon. Xiao looked at Yi Xian. Don't worry, our men have arrived at Spiritual Mountain. They attacked. Yi Xian fell silent. Xiao Xiao suddenly walked slowly towards Yi Xian. Every time he took a step, the space would tremble slightly and then ripples would appear. He was on guard. Although Yi Xian's cultivation was much lower than his, he was still on guard. People often died because of their carelessness. That was why Yi Xian didn't attack immediately. He could sense that Xiao Xiao was constantly on guard. It was impossible for him to catch him off guard. Yi Xian burst into laughter. "Old man, come on. Take my invincible sword attack." As soon as he finished speaking, the green profound sword in his hand trembled violently, and a sharp and ear-piercing sword cry soared into the sky. Xiao Xiao narrowed his eyes and clenched his right hand. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly turned around and flew on his sword, vanishing into the horizon in the blink of an eye. He escaped. In an instant Xiao Xiao was stunned. That guy actually escaped? Xiao Xiao quickly came back to his senses, and his expression was rather unsightly. He was actually playing with him. Xiao Xiao took a step forward and vanished on the spot. At the end of the horizon Yi Xian flew through space on his sword. Since the azure sword could ignore space, he was extremely fast, so fast that even Xiao Xiao, who was at the Daoist realm, couldn't catch up to him in a short period of time. However, Xiao Xiao clearly didn't intend to give up, and he kept chasing after him. In the space and time, Yi Xian suddenly took out a voice transmission stone. "Sis, where are you?" A moment later Yang Yanxua's voice sounded in his mind. "What are you doing?" Yi Xian hurriedly said, "I missed you." Yang Yanxua remained silent for a moment before she said, "Are you being pursued?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "Of course not. How could I be hunted down?" Yang Yanxua suddenly said, "I'm busy, let's talk another day." Yi Xian's expression froze. Damn it. She was his biological sister. Right at this moment the space in front of him suddenly split apart, and then an enormous hand that could hold up the sky grabbed out. Yi Xian squinted his eyes and gently flicked the hilt with his thumb. The azure profound sword was unsheathed and slashed down. Boom. The enormous hand was directly slashed into nothingness, and then the space in the surroundings surged violently. Meanwhile Xiao Xiao appeared in front of Yi Xian. Xiao Xiao gazed at Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian issued a command in his heart, and a sword suddenly appeared between Xiao Xiao's brows. However, it stopped when it was half an inch away from his brows because a mysterious force had obstructed the azure profound sword. The sword returned to Yi Xian's hand after it missed its target. Xiao Xiao didn't waste her breath, and she raised her hand and smashed her fist forward. With this punch, Yi Xian felt that everything in front of him had darkened. Space was obliterated. Yi Xian closed his eyes slowly, and then the azure profound sword in his hand suddenly flew over to him and transformed into a sword shield. Bang! The sword shield shook violently, and then the space in the surroundings was instantly transformed into ash like burning paper. However, Yi Xian and the sword shield were completely unharmed. The sword and shield had forcefully blocked all of Xiao Zhao's power. Seeing this scene, Xiao Zhao's expression darkened in the distance. Yi Xian opened his palm and the sword shield transformed into a sword that fell into his palm. He looked at the distant Xiao Xiao and said with a smile, "So, even the Daoist realm isn't that strong." After exchanging blows, he suddenly realized that the gap between him and the martial Dao realm wasn't that great. At this moment Xiao Xiao opened his palm and flipped it lightly. In an instant the space-time around Yi Xian began to reverse. At the same time, countless black divine lightning appeared above his head. These divine lightning emitted an extremely terrifying and powerful aura. However, Yi Xian was not afraid because these divine lightning were formed from the power of time and space. Xiao Xiao said softly, "Fall." Countless bolts of divine lightning fell. Yi Xian did not dodge. He slowly closed his eyes and stabbed upwards with his sword. Countless bolts of divine lightning instantly drowned him, but not long after, all the divine lightning disappeared, because they had all been absorbed by the Xian profound sword. Seeing this scene, Xiao Zhao's expression suddenly turned ugly. What the hell? He could even absorb this. Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath. He realized that he could use the Xian profound sword to absorb the divine lightning. To him, absorbing the divine lightning was a great supplement. If he did it a few more times, he might be able to reach the Heartless realm. In the distance, Xiao Xiao said in a deep voice, "What kind of monster are you?" It had to be said that Yi Xian had shocked him. What he had used just now was the spacetime divine lightning. This was an existence even more terrifying than the spacetime abyss. As for this fellow, not only could he ignore the space-time divine lightning, he could even absorb it. This was too abnormal. At this moment, Zhou Xian suddenly disappeared from where he stood. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Xiao Xiao. Xiao Xiao's eyes narrowed as he punched out. On the other hand, Zhou Xian actually didn't dodge at all, and he allowed the punch to smash onto his chest. When his fist came into contact with Zhou Xian's chest, a strand of uneasiness instantly arose in Xiao Xiao's heart. But at this moment, it was utterly impossible for him to withdraw his fist, so he could only increase his strength. Bang! Zhou Xian was blasted flying. On the other hand, Xiao Xiao had fallen directly into a space-time abyss. A mysterious space-time abyss. Xiao Xiao's brows knit together slightly. He slowly pressed his right hand forward, causing the space-time abyss before him to sink down. In the next moment, he suddenly charged forward. Bang! Xiao Xiao had forcefully charged out. However, Zhou Xian had vanished at this moment. Xiao Xiao's expression became extremely unsightly when he witnessed this scene, and he suddenly turned his head around. Call the law enforcement guards over. He noticed that it was still slightly difficult for him to kill Zhou Xian with his own strength. Zhou Xian definitely wouldn't be able to defeat him, but the problem was that this fellow didn't want to fight him to the death. Spiritual Mountain. On this day, a person suddenly appeared at the foot of the spiritual mountain. It was Yunjie's realm lord, Zhou Xian. After Zhou Xian walked up the spiritual mountain, Elder Xian appeared in front of him. Zhou Xian glanced at the straw hut in the distance and then he smiled. Elder Xian, I want to meet Mountain Lord Yan. Elder Xian stared straight at Zhou Xian. Scram. Zhou Xian laughed heartily. Rumor has it that Elder Xian is the third strongest in the Daoist realm. I want to see for myself. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot. In an instant, the entire heavens and earth boiled. A vicious look flashed across Elder Xian's eyes. He took a step forward, and in the next moment, the two of them entered an unknown and mysterious space-time. The two of them didn't dare to fight here because there was a powerful restrictive spell here. It was a spell that Jun Daolin had left behind in the past. If someone broke the boundary of the space-time, it would be a destructive or large-scale attack. The restrictive spell that Jun Daolin had left behind would appear. It wasn't something that a Daoist realm expert could resist. Therefore, basically no one dared to destroy the boundary of the Dao realm in recent years. While Elder Xian and Zhou Xian were fighting, a dozen mysterious experts suddenly appeared in front of the straw hut. One of them waved his sleeve and the straw hut turned into nothingness. There wasn't a single person in the straw hut. The leading expert frowned slightly and he turned to look at the surroundings. He waved his sleeve again and the surrounding straw huts all disappeared. But Yan Bianshan was still nowhere to be seen. The leading expert's face turned cold and he turned to look. Realm Lord, that Yan Bianshan isn't here. Hearing this, the space-time nearby suddenly turned into a vortex, and in the next moment, Zhou Xian walked out. He glanced at the spiritual mountain and very quickly his face turned cold. He looked at Elder Xian who wasn't far away. Where is she? Elder Xian sneered. Do you think I'll tell you? Zhou Xian narrowed his eyes and at this moment, dozens of powerful auras appeared around Elder Xian. There were more than 10 Daoist realm experts among them. The killing intent in Zhou Xian's eyes intensified. Kill. The surrounding experts were about to attack and at this moment Elder Xian suddenly said, I'll tell you. The Mountain Lord is in young Master Ye's body. Yi Xian. Zhou Xian frowned slightly. Yi Xian. Elder Xian nodded his head obediently. After a moment of silence, Zhou Xian said, Let's go. With that, he directly led everyone and disappeared from the scene. Elder Xian looked at the horizon and said softly, Little guy, you have to hold on. Yi Xian. Somewhere in the sky, Zhou Xian brought Yunjie and the other experts to meet up with the law enforcement sect. Xiao Xiao frowned slightly. She's in Yi Xian's body? Zhou Xian nodded. That woman is not on Spiritual Mountain at all. Xiao Xiao was silent. Zhou Xian said solemnly, That woman did not appear either, which means that she is very likely to break through to the inaction realm. Xiao Xiao said softly, Do you think she can reach the inaction realm in a short time? Zhou Xian shook his head. Impossible. She is not Dao Ling. Xiao Xiao said softly, I think she can. Zhou Xian looked at Xiao Xiao stunned. Why? Xiao Xiao said solemnly, This Yi Xian is not simple. That sword in his hand not only can ignore any space-time, but it can also absorb spacetime lightning. He paused, then said, when he first came to the Dao border he was only at the life-body realm, but now he is at the primordial spirit realm and he used less than half a month. Zhou Xian frowned slightly. You mean he has some divine item that can shorten the cultivation time? Xiao nodded. Hearing this, Zhou Xian's expression suddenly became ugly. Xiao said softly, we have already attacked Spiritual Mountain, which means we have no way out. If that Yan Bianshan reaches the inaction realm, even if she is half a step into the inaction realm, it will be a huge disaster for us. In other words, we do not have much time. Zhou Xian said solemnly, then Yi Xian. Xiao looked into the distance, a trace of worry flashing in her eyes. Kill that kid at all costs or he will become a huge disaster in the future. Zhou Xian nodded. I will go contact those guys from the Hidden Killers Pavilion. Xiao frowned slightly. At this time Zhou Xian said solemnly, they must already know. It is impossible for us to eat it alone. Xiao was silent for a moment then nodded, go contact them. Zhou Xian turned and left.